Chapter 430. The South Jean royal merchant in the West Pavilion on the third floor was willing to offend the bigwigs of the Tang Empire to participate in the bidding for the chicken soup calligraphy. This could only be the will of the crown prince behind the royal merchant. As the future emperor of the South Jean kingdom, who was the most hostile to the Tang Empire, he was willing to spend a large sum of money to purchase the chicken soup calligraphy to make a name for Ning Quebec. Other than the fact that he was crazy, Ning Ke could not understand why. In the end, his train of thought deviated from the right path and entered the realm of evil. Chu Yuxian did not know that Ning Ke's question was full of hidden meanings. He replied, "The South Jean Kingdom Crown Prince is known for being lecherous. How would he be interested in men? I have never heard of him liking calligraphy." Just as the two of them were conversing, the bidding for the chicken soup calligraphy in Stone Residence became more and more intense. There were still only two parties bidding, the steward of the Grand Secretary's mansion and the royal merchant from the South Jean Kingdom. But with just the two of them bidding, sparks flew in all directions. Ning Ke had long forgotten why the Crown Prince of South Jean Kingdom wanted to buy the chicken soup stickers as he listened to the increasing bids and the increasing amount of money. He was very satisfied. Not long after, the price of the chicken soup calligraphy rose to 18,000 taels of silver. The sound of curtains being drawn could be heard from the third floor. The butler of Grand Secretary Wang's mansion walked out with a sullen face. He stood by the railing and looked in the direction of the West Pavilion. He sneered and said, "The Tang Empire has always convinced people with reason and virtue. This is Chang, and I will not bully you people from the South Jean Kingdom." The bamboo curtain of the West Pavilion was lifted, and a slightly plump middle-aged merchant with a ruddy complexion slowly walked out. He was dressed in a brocade robe with a jade pendant on his waist. He had an extraordinary bearing. He looked at the chief steward and said, "I have an important mission, so I don't dare to give up easily. Please forgive me, chief steward." The price had been shouted, and the harsh words had been spoken. What followed was naturally a repeat of the previous bidding process. Although none of the parties suddenly increased the price by too much, as time passed, the price of the chicken soup calligraphy on the stage gradually increased to a jaw-dropping level. 31,000 taels of silver, 32,000 taels of silver, 33,000 taels of silver. The chief steward of the Grand Secretary's mansion looked gloomy as he stared at the South Jean merchant in the West Pavilion and bid 33,000 taels of silver. With the Grand Secretary's seniority as a senior statesman of 3 dynasties, no matter how strict the laws of the Tang Empire were, it could not stop the riches hidden in his mansion. 30,000 taels of silver was indeed a lot, but it would not frighten the chief steward. However, everyone knew that he was backed by Grand Secretary Wang. A courtier spending 10,000 taels of silver on a section of calligraphy would definitely cause some discussion. Therefore, he wanted to see the merchant from the South Jean Kingdom back off. Who would have thought that the South Jean Kingdom royal merchant would add another 1,000 taels of silver without hesitation? Looking at his calm expression, it seemed that he would not care even if he added tens of thousands of taels of silver. The chief caretaker of the Grand Scholar Manor looked even gloomier. There were some foreign envoys and merchants in the stone house. Most of them were Tangs, the wealthiest kind. They could not help but feel annoyed at the South Jean royal merchant's actions. It was not that they did not have money, but no matter how much they loved Sir Ning's calligraphy, they would feel that the price was too high. The South Jean royal merchant did not seem like he was here to buy the section. Instead, he seemed like he was here to compete with the Tangs, or even to embarrass them. Discussion started in the pavilion. 2 royal merchants from the Tang Empire who lived in the south city of Chang and prepared to bid. The atmosphere became more heated, or rather tense. The only person who could remain calm was probably the seller, Zhongli. He had long known that the South Jean royal merchant was in Chang, and so he had expected such a scene. It could even be said that he had single-handedly caused the conflict between the Tangs and the South Jean Kingdom. Zhongli was the son of the Zhong family in Yangwan. Yangwan was the most prosperous city in the southern border of the Tang Empire. It was very close to the South Jean Kingdom. In fact, it had been the northern capital of the South Jean Kingdom 300 years ago. As such, The people who lived there knew the South Jin Kingdom very well. Even though he had been chased out of the Zhong family a long time ago, he knew everything that had happened in the South Jin Kingdom. He was well aware of the sensitivity and even abnormal self-esteem of the South Jin Kingdom people when they faced the Tangs. Because of something, he was certain that the South Jin royal merchant would not give up on the chicken soup calligraphy, no matter what. That was why he dared to say in front of everyone that the chicken soup calligraphy would sell for at least 30,000 taels of silver. Now that it had passed the 30,000 taels of silver, Zhongli could not help but feel proud. As a seller, his greatest honor was to leave his name in the history books along with the goods he sold. As a seller, Zhongli could be calm, happy, and proud. However, as the owner of the stone house, the boss found that the atmosphere was too intense and out of control. He could not be happy no matter what. It was good to earn more commission, but what would he do if he offended two important figures? The boss stood behind a pillar on the first floor. He looked at Zhongli with a gloomy expression and signaled with his eyes. Zhongli understood and began to try to reduce the atmosphere. However, as an imperial merchant of the Tang Empire brazenly joined the battle, his attempt to end the auction suddenly turned into a bubble. Hearing the increasing amount of money, even Zhongli, who had seen more extravagant auctions and bigger scenes, began to feel nervous and even terrified. The bidding had already become a battle between the Tang and the South Jin Kingdom. Although this battle had nothing to do with powerhouses or cavalry, it was only about money. However, it was not something he could control. Zhongli lifted his sleeves to wipe his sweat. He realized that he had underestimated the determination of the people of Chong and to protect their pride. He had also underestimated the influence of the crown prince of the South Jin Kingdom on the South Jin royal merchant. The royal merchant of the South Jin Kingdom made another unbelievable offer. Then, he looked at the nobles of the Tang Empire in the pavilion and smiled. The South Jin Kingdom is not as wealthy as the Tang Empire, and I'm just a small merchant. I'm not worthy of your attention. However, the South Jin Kingdom is one of the few big countries, and we still have some silver in our treasury. Hearing this, the pavilion was in an uproar. Although the Tang people present were rich, if the South Jin royal merchant used the South Jin Kingdom's national treasury to bid, who could be his match? Unless the Tang emperor took out the silver from the palace treasury and bid. Just as the merchant had said, although the South Jin Kingdom was not as wealthy as the Tang Empire, how could a royal merchant or a grand secretary compare to the amount of silver in their national treasury? Were they really going to be humiliated by the South Jin royal merchant today? Although they could bid as high as they wanted, what if the South Jin royal merchant suddenly stopped bidding? They could not go back on their word when the time came. The laws of the Tang Empire were not just for show and Chang'an. How can you use the silver in the national treasury to fight with someone? Ninkei looked at the South Jin royal merchant. He could not understand what was happening. Chu Yuxian said mockingly, "How would such a backward country know any rules? Do you think it's like the Tang Empire?" In the eyes of the South Jin emperor and the crown prince, the national treasury is their own accounting room. They can use it however they want. At this moment, a subordinate of the grand secretary hurried to the steward's side and whispered a few words. The steward, who had been silent for a while, turned to look at the South Jin royal merchant in the West Pavilion. He laughed coldly and said, "I was wondering why the South Jin crown prince was so interested in the chicken soup calligraphy. So it's because of the hill master of the Great River Kingdom." The South Jin royal merchant did not deny it. He smiled and said, "That's right. His Highness knows that the hill master loves the chicken soup calligraphy, so he decided to buy it and give it to you." The chief steward looked at the royal merchant from the South Jin Kingdom and suddenly laughed out loud. He said mockingly, "Everyone knows that the hill master is infatuated with Mr. Ninkei of the Tang Empire. That's why she loves the chicken soup calligraphy so much. Does the crown prince expect that the chicken soup calligraphy can replace Mr. Ninkei in the hillmaster's heart? This is ridiculous and ridiculous to the extreme." The South Jin royal merchant's expression changed. The steward did not wait for him to speak. He continued mockingly, "You're trying to use something that belongs to a woman's beloved to make her fall in love with someone else. I really don't know what the crown prince is thinking. I didn't expect the South Gene people to be trash on the battlefield. The swordmaster from the Sword Garret is trash. You're even so useless in love. The South Gene royal merchant's face darkened at the humiliation. His sleeves trembled and his fists were clenched tightly. However, there was nothing wrong with the steward's words. The South Gene army had never been a match for the Tang cavalry on the battlefield. Lu Qingshan from the Sword Garret had indeed been killed by Ning Ke at the side door of the academy. The story between the calligraphy addict, Mo Shanshan, and Ning Ke had been spread around the world for many days. The royal merchant suppressed his anger and scolded coldly. The bidding for the calligraphy is based on strength. Speak if you have money. Don't talk if you don't. Do you think the Tangs only know how to talk? The moment he said that, the Tangs in the pavilion immediately cursed at him. However, he ignored them and looked at the seller on the stage with a gloomy expression. It seemed like he had made up his mind to use money to pressure the seller. Ning Ke did not expect the South Gene Crown Prince to buy the chicken soup calligraphy at such a high price just to please Shanshan. After a moment of silence, he took out something from his sleeve and handed it to Chu Yuxian. After saying a few words, he lifted the curtain and walked out of the stone house. Chu Yuxian was stunned for a moment. He gripped the item tightly and walked downstairs to find the owner of the stone house. The owner of the stone house recognized him as Old Master Chu's only son and was slightly stunned. He took the seal from Chu Yuxian and glanced at it. His expression changed drastically. This seal was Ning Ke's private seal and rarely appeared on his calligraphy sections. Not many calligraphy appraisers had seen it before. However, the owner had seen it on the back of the chicken soup calligraphy. The owner then realized that Sir Ning had been quietly watching the auction in the pavilion. When he saw Chu Yuxian's private seal, he thought that Sir Ning was expressing his dissatisfaction and anger. He could not help but feel uneasy. Could it be that his judgment of the old brush pen shop's calligraphy sections was wrong? Did the handmaiden really steal it? He heaved a sigh of relief when he heard Chu Yuxian's words. Chu Yuxian gestured for him to bring him to the stage and invited the famous seller to the side. The people in the pavilion noticed the commotion on the stage and gradually stopped their discussions and cursing. The South Gene royal merchant stood by the railing expressionlessly and looked at the stage. He thought that no matter what the Tangs did, the chicken soup calligraphy would definitely be brought back to the South Gene kingdom today. The owner cupped his fists and bowed to the people in the three pavilions. He then cleared his throat and said, "The chicken soup calligraphy is confirmed to be won by room A2 for 33,000 taels of silver." The pavilion was silent because no one had realized what was going on. Then someone reacted and let out a soft cry of confusion. Room A2 was where the steward of Grand Secretary Wang's residence resided. However, the bidding had not ended. Why did the stone house say that the Grand Secretary Wang's residence had won the chicken soup calligraphy? The South Gene royal merchant's face was livid as he looked downstairs. He questioned coldly, "Even if the bidding ended, I was the one who paid the most. Why did the calligraphy go to someone else? Could it be that all the Tang people do business like this? Don't you care about your reputation?" Chu Yuxian recalled what Ning Ke had said before he left. After making sure that he remembered every word correctly, he looked at him and said mockingly, "So what if you have more money? I won't sell it to you, no matter how much money you have. Because Mr. 13 doesn't respect the Crown Prince of South Gene. He actually wrote more than 10,000 words. It seems like energy is really like water in a sponge. There are only a few recommendation votes now. Please squeeze, take a look, and vote. Thank you very much. There's another important matter. Taiwanese readers, please be happy. The Jianye traditional Chinese calligraphy will be sold in bookstores on the 5th of July. I've looked at the cover carefully. I like it very much. There's no problem with it. However, it involves spoilers. Wahaha, welcome to buy it. The more the better. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 431. Ning Ke was the most inconspicuous in the back of the mountain of the academy, but Mr. 13 was the most famous among the people. His name was spread in the military camp at the frontier fortress, and the people in the streets of Chong and we're talking about the slash at the side door of the academy. The people in the stone house might not know Mr. First or Mr. Second, but how could they not know that Mr. 13 was the owner of the old brush pen shop, serene? After Chu Yuxian said those words on the stage, the pavilion was silent for a moment. Then, there was a sudden burst of cheers and shouts of excitement. The South Jean royal merchant gripped the railing tightly, his face pale with anger. He glared at Chu Yuxian and shouted, "Who are you?" Chu Yuxian held his fan with one hand and placed the other on the back of his hand. He bowed to the crowd and said, "I am Chu Yuxian from Dongsheng, Mr. Ning's representative." Then he looked at the West Pavilion on the third floor and at the ugly expression of the South Jean royal merchant. He smiled and said, "I can sell the chicken soup calligraphy to anyone but you South Jean people. Do you have a problem with that?" The South Jean royal merchant trembled with anger and scolded, "How can you say that?" The owner of the stone house cupped his hands and explained, "Today, the old brush pen shop's 7 calligraphy pieces have special rules. The supplementary rules have been sent to everyone. Everyone should know that Sir Ning has the right to choose his own buyer." The South Jean royal merchant thought of the document he had seen on the table in the pavilion and suppressed his anger. His chest heaved up and down as he said, "Even if Sir Ning has the right to choose his own buyer, he should be the one to do it. How can he let this representative, who we don't even know is the real one, exercise his right?" Did the old brush pen shop know about what happened just now? Was Sir Ning here just now? "You Tangs, don't use such shameless methods." The owner was silent for a moment before he smiled and said, "You are right. Sir Ning was here just now, but he has already left. Before he left, he asked Mr. Chu to make the decision." The South Jean royal merchant was stunned. As mentioned earlier, Ning Kei's reputation in Chong and was too resounding. Especially after he killed Lu Yiqing, his position in the hearts of the Tangs was extremely high. Everyone wanted to see his true face. At this time, the high officials and nobles in the pavilion were originally here for his calligraphy. When they heard that he was in the pavilion earlier, they couldn't help but beat their chests and stamp their feet in regret. Someone shouted, and the sound of footsteps rang out in the pavilion. Dozens of people opened the bamboo curtains and rushed down the wooden building, unable to restrain their curiosity and excitement, towards the outside of the courtyard. The chicken soup calligraphy had already belonged to Grand Secretary Wang's residence. The people present could not drink the chicken soup, so of course they wanted to see what the old hen that made the soup looked like. In the blink of an eye, the stone house was empty. The royal merchant of South Jean Kingdom stood by the railing. His expression was extremely ugly, but he had nothing to say. "Honorable Ning, wait a moment. Mr. 13, wait. My master invites you over." People walked out of the courtyard, passed through the green forest, and came to the shore of Willow Lake. Looking at the boat that was getting further and further away from the quiet lake, they waved their arms and shouted for Ning Kei to come back. The boat leisurely moved on the quiet lake. From afar, they could only see a figure dressed in black walking out of the black canopy. He greeted them with his hands folded in front of his chest and then went ashore. Looking at the back of the figure disappearing into the alley beside the Victory House, the people by the lake sighed with regret. There was a rumor in Chong, in city, that the 7 calligraphy sections being auctioned by the stone house were stolen by the little handmaiden of the old brush pen shop. Ning Kei was present today, so naturally, this rumor was denied in some ways. While the auction of the stone house was going on, the little handmaiden Sang Sang was in a quiet study in the backyard of the Ingo Casino in the western city. She was staring at the pile of papers on the table. Since the night at the Spring Breeze Pavilion 2 years ago, the underworld of Chong and city had been under the control of the Fish Dragon Gang. The study of this casino, which used to belong to a big shot in the western city, had become the Fish Dragon Gang's warehouse. The papers on the table looked a little new, and the handwriting on them was neat. They were not outstanding and could not be compared to the calligraphy sections in the old brush pen shop. However, the actual value of these papers was actually quite high. These papers were the title deeds of houses and land. Several old stewards of the casino with deep wrinkles were calculating the title deeds of houses and land. Mr. Chi, the leader of the Fish Dragon Gang, stood aside and stared at them worriedly. The beads on the abacus in the hands of the old stewards moved very fast, making a clicking sound in the quiet room. It sounded crisp and pleasant, but it made Mr. Chi more and more worried. The beads on the abacus were still moving fast, and there was still a long time before the calculation was completed. Sang Sang put down the title deed of the newly built 3-section house on the lakeside and said, 41,462 taels of silver are still missing. Mr. Chi looked at her with a slightly strange expression, thinking that these stewards were the best accounting experts in the casino, but they had not calculated it yet. Where did she get this number? Sang Sang knew what he was thinking, but she did not explain and waited calmly. After some time, the old stewards of the casino finally finished the complicated calculation. The leading steward carefully cleaned up the title deeds of houses and land on the table and respectfully reported, according to the letter of intent a few days ago, the total number is still missing is 41,600 taels of silver. This number was a little different from the number Sang Sang had calculated, but not by much. Mr. Chi looked at Sang Sang in surprise, thinking that it was really amazing that she could only make such a small mistake in mental calculation. Sang Sang knew that her calculation was correct, and those old stewards had calculated the tax rate wrong on a title deed. However, thinking that the difference was not big, she did not point it out. Looking at her expression, Mr. Chi made a gesture to let those stewards of the casino leave, and then said seriously, the price of houses and land at the foot of Yinming Mountain is indeed cheaper than other places in Chang'an City. But if we buy so many houses at once, some greedy guys will always raise the price. Then he shook his head and said, although the brothers in the gang can lower the price, and the Chang and local government has also talked to someone, we can't go too far. If someone reported this to the imperial court, it would be hard for me to explain to second brother Chow when he comes back. So this is probably the final price. It turned out that the title deeds of houses and land on the table were the deeds of the houses by the Yinming Lake. The Yinming Lake had recently been dredged by the Ministry of Works of the Imperial Court, and the accumulated lake mud was still piled up near the sand and stone mountains. It was said that it would not be better until next summer. Because of this, although the scenery of a Yinming Lake at the foot of Yinming Mountain was beautiful, it was still not a good place for people in Chang and who paid attention to the quality of life. The land and housing prices by the Yinming Lake were the cheapest in Chang'an City. Nowadays, most of the houses by the lake were dilapidated old houses, and the occasional new houses were built by ordinary people who were greedy for cheap. Hearing Mr. Chi's words, Sang Sang nodded and said, young master has already predicted that the price will be raised. These days, Mr. Chi had been secretly buying the title deeds of houses and land by the Yinming Lake at Ningke's request. As the leader of the biggest gang in Chang and City, he naturally had countless subordinates to do this for him. But at this time, he still did not understand why Ning Ke wanted to buy these properties. It's good to stroll by the Yinming Lake occasionally. It's not suitable to live there. He frowned and said, even if you want to live there, you don't have to buy all the houses by the lake. No matter how low the price is, it's still a huge sum. Sang Sang said, I don't know why young master wants to buy all the houses by the lake. Maybe he wants to be quiet and doesn't want to be disturbed. Mr. Chi shook his head repeatedly and thought that if he really wanted to be quiet, there would be so many beautiful places in Chang and City to build new houses, and there would be no need to make such a big noise. And it was obviously a losing deal. More than 40,000 taels of silver. Sang Sang looked at the title deeds of houses and land on the table and said to herself, I don't know if it will be enough. Mr. Chi said, I do have some money in my hands, but it's all in the public account. I just manage it for second brother Chow and other brothers, so I can't take it out. Sang Sang nodded and said, thank you, Mr. Chi. Mr. Chi waved his hand to show that it was okay, and then he came up with an idea and said, in fact, as long as Ning Ke enters the palace and says something, it's not a big deal to get more than 40,000 taels of silver. Sang Sang thought about Ning Ke's intention of buying the houses by the Yinming Lake and understood that he definitely did not want to have anything to do with the imperial court. She shook her head and said, let's see what happens in the stone house. There's no need. Ning Ke walked into the room and looked at the title deeds of houses and land on the table. He said, "If the price on the letter of intent will not change, then we have enough money in hand." Mr. Chi sneered and said, "The price we offered is already very generous, and we have already signed the letter of intent. If the owners of the houses by the lake temporarily raise the price, do they really think our brothers of the Fish Dragon Gang are a group of people who believe in Buddhism?" Ning Ke liked Mr. Chi's attitude very much and said, "The money will probably be sent here later. At that time, I'll have to trouble you to sign the contract with the owners of the houses." Mr. Chi was a little surprised and asked, "Whose name?" Ning Ke said, "Second Brother Chao's name first." It was not uncommon for people in Jianghu to entrust their property to their brothers. Mr. Chi said without hesitation, "Okay." Ning Ke said, "Can this matter be kept a secret?" Mr. Chi said, "It depends on how long it takes." Ning Ke calculated the time and said, "This winter at the latest." Mr. Chi said, "No problem." After leaving the Ingo Casino in the western city, Ning Ke and Sang Sang did not directly go back to the old brush pen shop, but went to Yinming Mountain. The two looked at the lake at the foot of the mountain and those scattered courtyards on the other side of the lake. The reason why they bought these courtyards was that the old brush pen shop was too busy now. Although Ning Ke liked the lively atmosphere of Lin 47th Street very much, he knew that he could not continue to live there after the visit of the great divine priest of Revelation. He bought all the courtyards by the lake for the sake of tranquility, but there were other more important reasons. However, those reasons did not need to be known by others. Sang Sang looked at the houses on the other side of the lake and asked, "Will we live here in the future?" Ning Ke nodded and said, "After winter, this lake will be frozen solid. Only one chapter today, then I feel that my state is almost back. I'll go to work on the outline. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for it. Your support is my biggest motivation." Chapter 432. It was late spring in Chang, and the temperature was getting hotter. But it was the best season in the wilderness in the north. The breeze blew through the knee-high grass like a green ocean. About 50 miles north of the Left King's Palace, there were many colors in the green ocean near the Min Mountain. The scorched ground, the cut grass roots, the broken arrows that were deeply embedded in the ground, and the traces left by the tactical arrays showed that a war had just ended here. The war came to the wilderness with spring and ended as spring deepened. The Central Plains Allied forces were strong, and with the help of the palace's cavalry, they started a series of battles with the Desolate Man tribes that were migrating south. The cruel war lasted for nearly 100 days, and many people died on both sides. However, the Desolate Man managed to hold on to the last line of defense and kept the most important and fertile pastures. The West Hill Divine Palace issued an edict, and all the country's provisions were continuously transported to the Yen Kingdom. Even with the help of powerful cultivators, they still failed to drive the Desolate Man back to the cold region. The reason was that the Desolate Man warriors were strong. The Tang cavalry and the West Hill Papal cavalrymen did not take action. The smell of burning embers floated on the grassland after the war. Not far away, on the sloping meadow of Min Mountain, there were hundreds of piles of stones. All kinds of cloth strips were hung on the piles, dancing in the spring breeze. These piles of stones were the graves of the grassland cavalrymen. Bodies of the Desolate Man warriors were rarely seen on the grassland, because no matter how fierce the war was, the Desolate Man would bring their dead companions back to the tribe at all costs. After nearly 100 days of war, the Central Plains Coalition Army did not capture a single Desolate Man. The Tang cavalry, who rode on horses to clean up the battlefield, looked at the piles of stones in the distance and thought of the Desolate Man's performance on the battlefield. They were vigilant and a little impressed. Never be a captive and never leave a comrade behind. This was also the iron rule of the Tang army. The Tang army finally understood why the Desolate Men were called natural-born warriors 1,000 years ago, and why their ancestors spent so much effort to drive the Desolate Men out of the wilderness. They were all the best warriors, so it was not surprising that the Tang army admired the Desolate Man tribe. They wanted to find a chance to fight with the powerful Desolate Man regretfully. In this bloody and cruel war, the Great Tang's northeast border army was responsible for escorting supplies, suppressing rebellions, maintaining military discipline, and cleaning up the battlefield. It had no chance of entering the main battlefield, because this was the will of the great Tang Emperor, as well as the order of General Xiaohou. Xiaohou looked at the fertile grassland under his feet and the grass roots that had been stepped into the soil by his boots. He slowly moved the soles of his boots, and with a soft, sizzling sound, something that looked like oil squeezed out from the side of his boots. In addition to the rotten black soil, there was also a lot of rotten blood. Since the start of the war, the cavalry under his command had yet to face the warriors of the Desolate Man tribe. They had not even seen a single Desolate Man. However, he was not as curious and excited as his subordinates to fight with them, because he was a Desolate Man himself. Looking at the black bloodstains left on the grassland, Xiaohou imagined the last battle a few days ago. He imagined the scene of his clansmen, whom he had not seen for a long time, falling under arrows or flying swords. His indifferent face was expressionless, but his eyebrows slightly twitched. The cavalry of the Tang Empire did not go to the front of the battlefield. This was His Majesty's order, as well as his own thoughts. His Majesty knew of his background, but still let him personally command the war. This meant that he agreed with his thoughts. Xiaohou was very grateful for His Majesty's trust. A clear whistle came from afar. He looked up expressionlessly and saw a grassland girl riding a horse and herding hundreds of sheep a few hundred feet below the meadow. Not long after the war, the people on the grassland started herding again. From his point of view, life was always peaceful and simple. The war was just an interlude. Looking at the grassland girl with rosy cheeks and bright eyes, Xiaohou remembered the scene when he escaped from the front gate many years ago and met his sister again in Hebei County. Then he confirmed that his gratitude to His Majesty had nothing to do with the trust and tolerance he had shown over the years. He was just grateful that His Majesty treated his sister well. Mr. Ku destroyed the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine with a single sword. Xiaohou went south to the Tang Empire and served in the army for decades. In the end, he became the top general of the Tang Empire. Then he became a distinguished visiting professor of the West Hill Divine Palace. But no one knew that he was a remnant of the Devil's Doctrine and a descendant of the Desolate Man. General Xiaohou seemed to be ruthless and powerful, but in reality, the few important figures in the world who knew his true identity had always tried to use his past identity to threaten and control him. His true identity was like countless spider webs, trapping him in the center of the web. No matter how he struggled, he could not break free. He could only gradually fall silent and then gradually suffocate. The Emperor of the Tang Empire and the hierarch of the West Hill Divine Palace knew where he came from. Both of them were like two indestructible stone walls that had been slowly closing in on each other over the years. Sandwiched between the stone walls, he found it hard to breathe. No matter which side he leaned towards, he would die. He once thought of leaning on both sides of the stone walls. He wanted to be loyal to the Tang Empire and serve the West Hill at the same time. In the past few years, he had indeed done so. But two loyalties could not get along. So in the end, he could only be loyal to himself. He maintained his strength with violence and coldness, and did not lean against the stone walls. Regrettably, there was a limit to a person's strength. He was still very strong now, but he would grow old, get sick, and become weak. However, those two stone walls would never become weak. Moreover, he had killed many people, and those people wanted to kill him very much. So Xiaohou wanted to make himself strong forever. He went to the north of the Hulun Sea and wanted to seize the tomes of Arcane. But in the end, he lost all hope in front of the scholar. When he was truly in despair, he suddenly had a new hope. In front of him, at the end of his rope, there was suddenly a glimmer of hope. That scholar made Xiaohou give up on the idea of being powerful forever, of being insufferably arrogant forever. But he also discovered the possibility of returning safely and not caring about the affairs of the world. Summer is coming. Everything is coming to an end. Xiaohou looked at the grassland in the spring breeze and thought of the coming midsummer. A rare, gentle expression gradually appeared on his cold face. His sister was the empress of the Tang Empire. His sister's name was Summer. The gentle spring breeze blew on the general's gentle face. There was a strong smell of blood in the wind, and then there was a sound of weeding. Not far behind Xiaoho, more than 100 grassland cavalrymen and Yin soldiers knelt on the ground. Under the bright knife light, their heads were separated from their bodies, and blood flowed into the sea of grass. These grassland cavalrymen and Yin soldiers were arrested for rebellion and violation of rules. They were all killed without a trial, just because of General Xiaoho's words. On the battlefield, the northeast border military of the Tang Empire was responsible for maintaining military discipline and suppressing rebellions. But today's execution without a trial had seriously violated the rules of the Divine Hall and the law of the Tang Empire. But the law of the Tang Empire could not control the general. So Xiaoho killed people like grass. His expression did not change. An officer rode a war horse and galloped from the direction of the military camp. Xiaoho took the letter handed by the officer. Although he was stationed in Tuyang City all year round and was far away in the wilderness, he was after all the defender general of the Tang Empire. He had many spies in Chang and city and the imperial court. He did not have many personal relationships with defender general of the state, Su Shi, but they respected each other. So some things in the military ministry would be passed directly to the military camp through those spies. The letter described what had happened in Chang and city recently. Xiaoho knew about the 2 conversations between Su Shi and Ning Quebec. He also knew about the death of Huang Xing and Yushu Aizhu on the rainy street. So he read the letter in silence for a long time. Last year in Tuyang City, he had reached an agreement with the Academy. So he did not want to care about the Academy's entry into the human realm and would not be as vigilant as Su Shi. However, the death of Huang Xing and Yushu Aizhu made him vigilant. Huang Xing and Yushu Aizhu were the prince's men and also his men, and they were both involved in that incident. Xiaoho did not understand why Ning Ke was against him. First he killed Lin Ling in the wilderness, then he killed Gu Shi in Tuyang City, and now he killed Huang Xing and Yushu Aizhu. All the people close to him had died one by one under his knife. The imperial court and the academy had agreed to his retirement, but it seemed that this person had a different opinion. Is there really a fish that escaped the net? Xiaoho frowned slightly and shook his head after thinking for a moment. He knew very well that Lin Guanyuan's son was dead, because he had personally examined the body of the white and clean little boy. Then he remembered a saying in Chang and city. The Academy's Ning Ke and Princess Li Yu were close. Was it because of the dragon throne? Xiaoho's expression grew colder and colder. He had already decided to retire, but if someone tried to harm his sister, harm his nephew, or steal the throne that belonged to his nephew, then he would kill the other party at all costs. The executions continued. The heads of the soldiers who violated the rules were cut off and fell on the grassland. The sound of bones scraping could be heard continuously. In the smell of blood, Xiaoho thought about what happened in Chang, and then gradually became murderous. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in the blue sky above the grassland. The man jumped down from the sky, whistling through the air, and rushed towards Xiaoho with an incomparably domineering, murderous intent. Xiaoho looked up. In addition to the figure in the sky, there was also the blazing sun. So he narrowed his eyes. He was already very familiar with this scene. He had seen it on the northern shore of the Holland Sea. These days, he had seen it several times. So he did not panic, and his expression was still calm and indifferent. An extremely fierce aura gushed out from his body. His leather boots stepped deeply into the soft grassland soil. The next moment, the soft soil instantly became extremely hard. With the soles of his boots as the center, countless traces like a spider web appeared on the grassland. Xiaoho stood in the middle of the grassland that was cracked like a spider web. With the huge counterforce from his feet, he flew into the sky. His battle robe fluttered. He was as fast as a flying bird and as bright as a god. Tang, the world wayfarer of the devil's doctrine, jumped down from the sky. Xiaoho, the former powerhouse of the devil's doctrine, flew into the sky. The two men met in the sky above the grassland. Once they met, it was like a bolt from the blue. In the clear sky, a muffled thunder suddenly sounded. A powerful shockwave began to spread from the sky in all directions. In the distance, the sheep that were lowering their heads to graze were startled and fell to the ground. The grassland girl who was herding the sheep was startled and fell off her horse. The Tang soldiers who were executing the military law covered their ears and knelt down in pain. The strong wind blew, and the sea of grass was flattened and broken grass was flying. I'm still one breath away. 1 chapter today and 2 chapters tomorrow. I'll gradually pull myself back to the state. To be continued. If you like this work, please come come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 433. The two silhouettes met in the air, like the legendary floating mountains in the depths of the western wilderness colliding with each other. The terrifying sound of the collision reverberated in all directions. The sharp, blood-red broadsword stirred up countless whistling sounds in the air, as if the blue sky was about to be split open. However, most of the momentum of the broadsword was blocked by a pair of iron fists. Occasionally, the broadsword broke through Xiaoho's iron fists and fell on his body. Xiaoho's battle robe would emit a pale yellow luster, preventing the sharp broadsword from biting into his body. The blood-red broadsword was the most powerful weapon of the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine. Although it could not break into Xiaoho's body, its weight and the impact made it a horrible iron hammer, hitting Xiaoho's body heavily. Xiaoho's iron fists were iron hammers, mercilessly hitting Tang's chest and abdomen. In the blink of an eye, the two powerhouses of the Devil's Doctrine hit each other countless times in the air. They hit each other countless times. They hit each other countless times. They hit each other countless times. The two floating hills kept hitting each other, separating, and then colliding again. The sound of the collision, like muffled thunder, kept ringing in the sky not far from the grassland. The continuous rumbling of thunder was so close that the sheep lying in the sea of grass, their bodies stiff, instinctively felt the terror of death. Terrified, they propped up their limp legs and fled in all directions. The grassland girl, who fell from the horse, lay in the grass and looked at the two godlike figures in the sky. She was so shocked and scared that she turned into a fool. She couldn't care less about her flock of sheep. The soldiers of the Tang army, who were enforcing the military law, covered their ears and knelt on the grass with pale faces. 3 soldiers who were lucky enough not to be beheaded could not cover their ears because their hands were tied. Black blood gradually flowed out of the corners of their eyes and noses. A moment later, they were shocked to death by the collision of the two powerhouses in the air. The horses on the meadow neighed in panic. The heaviest muffled thunder sounded in the sky above the grassland. The fierce wind swept the earth from the sky, breaking the long grass and flying everywhere. The two figures in the air finally separated, retreated hundreds of feet, and fell on the grassland. 2 muffled sounds almost at the same time sounded on the grassland. Xiaoho and Tang's domineering aura leaked out a little as their feet landed on the ground. The grassland under their boots suddenly collapsed and turned into 2 pits. The spring grass in the pits turned into broken pieces, like newly built tombs that had not been sealed. Enemy attack. Assassins. Even though they were facing peerless powerhouses like the world wayfarer of the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine, the well-trained border army of the Tang army woke up with a strong will and began to organize a defense line. The sound of horses' hooves and armors collided incessantly. In the military camp at the bottom of the meadow, hundreds of heavily armored black cavalry of the Tang Empire assembled at an unimaginable speed. They formed 2 vanguard formations and galloped out of the camp, leaving grass and dust in their wake as they launched a surprise attack and sealed off the meadow. Then there was the sound of wheels rolling. More than 10 heavy-duty crossbows were pushed out of the camp and aimed at the man on the meadow. Array masters, under the protection of powerful attendants, began to set up temporary arrays. The Tang cavalrymen stared at the man on the meadow with grim expressions. The enemy was only 1 person. The Tang army was fully prepared, but they still sensed an unprecedented danger. The atmosphere on the meadow became extremely tense. Tang stood in the meadow, stood in the slightly sunken pits, stood in front of hundreds of the most elite Tang cavalry in the world, stood in front of countless crossbow bolts. His expression was still calm, still silent, as if he had seen nothing. He only had eyes for Xiaohou, who was not far away. Dun was still wearing the ordinary leather jacket, but compared to the past, his leather jacket looked more shabby, and many parts of it had even rotted. His expression was calm, but his face was somewhat haggard. He had helped the Senior Statesman Society lead the tribe to fight against the Central Plains allied forces for many days. Recently, he had continuously attacked Xiaohou and fought with the Tang army several times. Even if he was an Iron Man, he would still feel tired, especially in the previous battle with Xiaohou. Although it was a short battle, he had suffered serious injuries. Countless holes had appeared on the leather jacket between his chest and abdomen, and the color of blood could be vaguely seen. The blood-red saber in his hand was also somewhat dim. The Tang army was undoubtedly the most powerful army in the world. In the past years, under the command of General Xiaohou, they had conquered the Yin Kingdom in the east and attacked the wilderness in the north. They had won every battle and conquered everything. They were extremely proud and confident. However, in front of this person, they could not be proud. The Tang army was not afraid of cultivators, because they thought that no matter how powerful a cultivator was, he was no different from an ordinary person in front of the black armor cavalry and crossbow bolts. But they had never seen a cultivator as powerful as Tang. The commander of the Tang cavalry stared at the man in the leather jacket in the distance and said coldly, "If we can't kill this monster today, how can we still call ourselves the Tang cavalry?" The hundreds of Tang cavalrymen on the meadow heard this, and their expressions suddenly became solemn. They pulled out their padeos from their sheaths and collectively shouted, "Yes, sir." Hundreds of padeos were pulled out from their sheaths at the same time. The sound of the padeos being pulled together became very solemn and even tragic. In the days after the war between the Central Plains Coalition Army and the Desolate Man, the man in the leather jacket on the meadow appeared around the Tang army 7 times. The Tang cavalrymen had surrounded him 7 times, but none of them had succeeded. Instead, this man had killed many of them. He had even succeeded in advancing 3 times, until he was in front of General Xiaohou. If the general was not powerful and invincible, he would have been killed by the man. Ordinary people were not as powerful as cultivators, and ordinary cavalrymen were not as powerful as cultivators. The Tang soldiers could accept this, but they could not accept that they could not even stop the man. They could not accept that, as subordinates, they had to rely on the general to maintain the safety of the camp. For the proud Tang cavalrymen, this was the greatest humiliation. The bleak whistling of the military flute sounded around the meadow. Nearly 800 Tang cavalrymen in heavy armor began to slowly form a formation. The array master with crossbows in the camp also pushed forward dozens of feet. A battle between the world's strongest cavalrymen and the world's strongest cultivators was about to begin. After betraying the front gate, you really became a coward. You only know how to hide in the camp and always let your men die. Tang looked at Xiaohou and said. Xiaohou put his fist to his lips and coughed twice. He stretched out his hand to stop the actions of his subordinates around the meadow. Then he looked up at Tang and said, "My troops did not participate in the war against the tribe. You know very well why. So I don't understand why you have been trying to kill me since last year, even risking your life to kill me." Tang took off his felt hat and threw it at his feet. Then he slowly walked out of the collapse of grass and stopped about 10 feet away from Xiaohou. He said, "Because there are many people in the front gate waiting for you to go back." Xiaohou frowned slightly. His eyebrows, which seemed like they were carved out of iron wire, looked cold and hard once he frowned. There was no one alive in the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine. There were only white skeletons and dead people on the ground. And the people waiting for him to go back were not people, but those unwilling ghosts. Before the front gate was broken by Mr. Ku, your teacher, and I had already left. This has nothing to do with me. You can't blame me for this. But after you went south, you still became a visiting professor of the West Hill Divine Palace. Tang said, "A traitor is a traitor." The ancestors of the Enlightenment doctrine are all waiting for you to go back and apologize. Senior Sister Murong is also waiting for you in the steamer. Hearing the word Murong, Xiaoho's frowned eyebrows gradually dimmed. After a long silence, he said, "It's not that easy to kill me." Tang said, "If I reveal your true identity, who in the world can tolerate you?" Xiaoho said, "It's enough that the West Hill, His Majesty, and the Academy can tolerate me. This means that heaven can tolerate me. As long as heaven can tolerate me, no one in the world will dare to not tolerate me." Tang said, "The Emperor of the Tang Empire can tolerate you because of your military achievements. Maybe he wanted to get rid of you long ago, but he didn't want to have a direct conflict with the West Hill. He didn't have any evidence, so he sent you to the border. The reason why the Academy didn't kill you is that the people in the Academy have long forgotten how to kill." "Maybe what you said makes sense." Xiaoho looked at him expressionlessly and said, "But you are not the Haotian Taoism, the Emperor of the Tang Empire, or the Academy. So you can't kill me. And now, in the whole world, only you want to kill me." Tang said, "Why can't I kill you?" Xiaoho looked at the blood-red giant knife in his hand and the terrible blade that penetrated deep into the ground of the grassland. He said, "Because the divine knife has dimmed in your hands." Tang said, "Your armor has also been broken." The battle robe that Xiaoho was wearing was a new one that he had changed in the morning. At this time, it had already been shredded by Tang's blade, revealing the armor that glowed with a metallic luster. He was the Defender General of the Tang Empire. The armor on his body was personally designed by Professor Huang He of the Academy and supervised by the Academy. It was engraved with complicated talisman lines that could provide him with seemingly endless protection. However, even though it seemed endless, it was not truly endless. Last year in the north of the Hullen Sea, the blood-red giant knife in Tang's hand had left a deep mark on the armor. In recent days of continuous battles, the armor had become much dimmer than in the past, especially near the chest and abdomen. There were even a few cracks, indicating that it would break. This armor wouldn't be able to last much longer. "You have been injured all the time." Xiaoho looked at the fist marks and bloodstains on Tang's chest and abdomen and said, "And you have been seriously injured. If you were in good condition, it would probably take about 4,000 armored black cavalries to trap you. But now you may die in the iron hooves at any time. If you want to kill me, you must be prepared to be killed by me at any time. Only if you can break my legs will your cavalry be able to trap me." Tang said, "But you know it is not easy to break my legs. You tried to do this 3 times in a row, but you did not succeed. You will never succeed." After a short pause, he said, "And you're also constantly getting injured." Xiaoho said, "My injuries are lighter than yours." Tang said, "But you are older than me." Xiaoho said, "We are both disciples of the Enlightenment doctrine. Do you still believe the nonsense of old age and weak health?" Tang said, "Old age does not mean that my body is weak, but my spirit is definitely not as good as it was. For example, you are more afraid of death now than before. Of course, you have been afraid of death since you cooked Murong." Xiaoho was silent. "The older one is, the more easily he is afraid of death. The more cowardly one is, the more easily he is afraid of death. And the more afraid one is, the more easily he will die." Tang looked at him and said, "As long as you do not return to Chang'an, I will always follow you and continue to waste time with you. I want to see you die in front of me with my own eyes." Xiaoho did not say anything else. He turned and walked down the meadow. The flute suddenly sounded, and the hooves around the meadow thundered. Hundreds of heavy armored black cavalries rushed toward Tang, who was standing quietly on the meadow, like a stream of iron. Xiaoho walked toward the military camp in the distance without looking back. Hearing the roaring flames on the meadow behind him, he did not look back. Listening to the thunder-like impact, he still did not look back. After 3 consecutive attacks and counterattacks, Tang never made a move. He never found a chance to hurt Tang's leg. So Tang would never let himself fall into the vortex of the charge of thousands of cavalries. From the moment he betrayed the Devil's Doctrine, Xiaoho knew that this day would come sooner or later. But he did not expect that the Devil's Doctrine was not responsible for killing the traitor, but the disciple of the 23-year cicada cultivation. He admitted that Tang was right. He was indeed more afraid of death now than before, but he was not worried that he would die in Tang's hands or legs. Because although Tang was one of the most powerful people in the world, he was also afraid. If it was the 23-year cicada cultivation, he had no choice but to escape back to Chang'an. Xiao thought so. Dozens of old houses and new houses had changed owners by the Yinming Lake at the foot of Yinming Mountain. The new owner did not make too many changes to the lakeside houses. He did not completely demolish and rebuild them, but he still spent a lot of money to renovate and tidy up the lakeside. Hundreds of workers and more than 10 carts gathered by the lakeside and began to remove the lake mud. The gardener invited from the scholar's mansion began to direct the boatmen to plant lotus in the lake. The owners of the old houses who had just moved away heard about what was happening here. They brought the old and the young back to Yinming Lake to see what was happening. Seeing the lake mud being removed by carts, seeing the boats planting lotus in the lake, and thinking about the beautiful scenery next year, they could not help but feel envious. Envy was envy. Perhaps there was some regret, but there was no jealousy or hatred. The people of Chang and had always been praiseworthy in this aspect. Since the new owner had spent money, then the other party should spend money to renovate Yujing. This was all the enjoyment that the other party deserved. The renovation of Yinming Lake was organized by Mr. Chi's Fish Dragon Gang. Ning Ke only asked them to temporarily not change the structure of the house and to plant more lotus. He did not know the specific construction and did not want to participate, so he still lived in the old brush pen shop on Lin 47th Street. Darky specially reminded me that Xiaoho is afraid of water. Ning Ke sat by the well and looked at the quiet and dark well water. He said, "But I don't understand why a powerhouse at the peak state of martial arts would be afraid of water. Maybe Xiaoho deliberately said that to deceive people, so I will not try to drown him. I decided to kill him and then plant him in lotus. There's one more chapter to be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 434. In late spring, it was getting hot and humid, but the brick-lined well was cool. Ning Ke sat on it and didn't want to leave. He waved the kitchen knife in his hand and talked excitedly. Sang Sang hung the clothes on the line and wiped her wet hands on the apron. Then she walked back to the wall and picked up the pen. After finishing the last piece, she asked, "How do we kill him?" Ning Ke left the well and walked to her. He pointed to something on the wall and said, "First, then kill him." Sang Sang put down the pen and looked back at him with a puzzled expression. The thing on the wall was a wooden figure with a pedestal. Ning Ke carved it himself. Sang Sang painted it with a thick layer of black paint, and there was a small black pot on the head of the wooden figure. To kill a person, you have to hit his body first. That is to say, you have to break his defense first. Ning Ke pointed the kitchen knife at the little wooden figure and said. Then he swung the kitchen knife horizontally and forcefully made a cut on his forearm. A moment later, the white cut on his arm was faintly oozing with blood. After I inherited youngest uncle's mantle and joined the devil, my body has become incredibly strong. As you can see, Xiaoho is a powerhouse of the devil's doctrine. You can imagine how strong his body is. He showed his cut forearm to Sang Sang and explained. Sang Sang scooped up a ladle of cool well water and washed the blood on his arm. Then she took out a handkerchief from her sleeve and wrapped it carefully for him. While she was doing this, Ning Ke continued his analysis. Xiaoho betrayed the devil's doctrine and joined Haotian Taoism. He became a visiting professor of the West Hill Divine Palace. To help him hide his identity, the Divine Hall may have taught him the secret method of martial arts cultivation. It's not maybe, it's certain. He looked at the black paint on the wooden figure and said, Xiaoho can use his psyche power to mobilize the qi of heaven and earth and condense it on the surface of his body. This layer of defense is like the paint on the wooden figure. The most troublesome thing is his armor. Ning Ke knocked the small black pot on the head of the wooden figure with the kitchen knife. The armor of the 4 generals of the Tang Empire was made by the Academy. The one on Xiaoho's body is the same. It was designed by Professor Huang He and made by 4th brother and 6th brother. Although it may not be as powerful as the one on Su Shi's body, it is still very powerful. Armor, protective, genuine chi, and the terrifying physical body of the experts of the Devil's Doctrine. These are 3 layers of protection. They can be used day and night. I think even the primordial 13 arrows can't penetrate them. Sang Sang couldn't understand such a tasteless and uninteresting joke about day and night and 3 layers of protection. She paused for a moment and then thought of the Academy's attitude. She said worriedly, "Assassinating the general of the Empire? Even the Academy will not allow you to do this." Ning Ke said, "When did I say that I would assassinate him?" Sang Sang asked, "Why don't we expose the relationship between Xiaohou and the Devil's Doctrine? I promised eldest brother that I wouldn't tell anyone about Xiaohou's identity." After a short pause, Ning Ke said, "Including his relationship with the Empress." Sang Sang asked in confusion, "But you told me." Ning Ke said, "You are not someone else." Sang Sang nodded and said, "That's true." After a moment, she thought of the calligraphy auction at the stone house and said, "You can't even solve Xiaohou's problem. Why do you have to offend the crown prince of the South Jin Kingdom?" Ning Ke didn't know how to explain it to Sang Sang. He couldn't possibly say it in front of her. At that time, when he heard that the crown prince of the South Jin Kingdom wanted to buy the chicken soup calligraphy to please the calligraphy addict, he felt angry for no reason. "What were cultivators to us in the past?" He changed the topic cleverly. Sang Sang thought of the conversation she had with Ning Ke in the city of Wei as a child. She thought of the burned record of the Tao and said, "Back then, cultivators were immortals in our eyes." Ning Ke said, "Then I am immortal now. We are immortals." Sang Sang laughed happily. Ning Ke said with a smile, "I'm not even afraid of the crown prince of the Tang Empire. Why would I be afraid of the crown prince of the South Jin Kingdom?" Sang Sang reminded him, "The Tang Empire doesn't have a crown prince." Ning Ke's smile faded and he sighed, "This is another troublesome matter." At the back of the mountain of the Academy, by the stream behind the blacksmith's house, under the big water cart, Ning Ke, 4th brother and 6th brother squatted by the stream and stared blankly. After an unknown period of time, 6th brother raised the black iron object in his hand to the sunlight. Ning Ke and 4th brother's eyes followed his movement. It was an iron object that looked like a small wine pot. There were many lines carved on it. Those lines were deep into the money, and most of them were straight. They couldn't see any deeper meaning. 6th brother touched the lines on the small iron pot with his thick fingers and said, "It's uniform enough." For master blacksmith like 6th brother, the difference that couldn't be seen by the naked eye couldn't escape the touch of his fingers. If his fingers judged that the lines were uniform, then they must be uniform. These lines cut the area of the iron pot into 64 pieces. It's not exactly the same, but it's close enough, especially the depth of the lines and the bearing capacity of the curved surface. It can ensure the uniformity when it breaks. 4th brother picked up a branch from the side, pointed to the small iron pot, and said, "Junior brother's idea sounds very reasonable, but I tried it with gunpowder last night, and it didn't work. I don't know if we should deepen the engraved lines a little bit. Maybe in this way we can guarantee that it will break." 6th brother shook his head and said, "If the lines are deeper, the internal stress of the iron pot will be destroyed and the structure will disperse. Once it breaks, it would just be a firecracker." Ning Ke hesitated for a moment and asked, "How about we try it with the real thing?" "Really? Maybe it will work." "I think so." 6th brother looked at 4th brother. 4th senior brother nodded. There was a spiral mouth at the top of the small iron pot, which was a perfect art carefully carved by 6th brother. Ning Ke unscrewed the iron pot stopper and said, "Even if it doesn't work, we can sell it as a wine pot." 6th senior fellow apprentice smiled honestly. Ning Ke took out a yellowish fire talisman and stuffed it into the iron pot. Then he tightened the stopper. "How?" 6th brother asked nervously. 4th brother pointed to the clear stream in front of him and said, "Throw it in." Ning Ke was a little nervous. Hearing this, he threw the small iron pot into the stream. "Wait a minute." 6th brother ran back to the iron-making room and carried 2 huge fine iron plates. He erected them by the stream and put them in front of the 3 people. 4th brother said unhappily, "Even if it succeeds, How powerful can it be? Why are you so nervous? Sixth brother said seriously. When youngest brother was developing the talisman arrow, fourth brother thought of the pavilion in the mirror lake that was half collapsed. His expression changed slightly, and he stood behind the fine iron plates. Seeing that everyone was ready, Ninkei closed his eyes, and his psyche power slowly seeped out from his sense of perception. It passed through the iron plates in front of him, through the clear stream, and into the small iron pot at the bottom of the stream. Then it fell on the talisman paper. As the psyche power entered the small iron pot, there was also a pure great spirit. The fire talisman in the small iron pot at the bottom of the stream suddenly burned violently, but it was confined in a very small space. After a moment, a deafening explosion resounded in the stream. Boom! Accompanied by a shrill roar, countless iron pieces shot out. Tock, 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 tock. The sound gradually subsided. After a long time, the three Academy brothers behind the fine iron plates cautiously poked their heads out. Their Academy uniforms had been completely soaked by the stream. Looking at the fragments of the small iron pot that were deeply embedded in the iron plate, thinking that if they didn't have this layer of protection, these iron fragments would have shot through their bodies like arrows. The three of them became abnormally pale, and a lingering fear surged in their hearts. Fourth senior brother, who was usually the calmest, looked at the dead fish floating in the stream and the half-collapsed water wheel in the stream. His voice trembled as he said, "Little junior brother, what are you doing? Tomorrow is Saturday, but we have a holiday, so there is no rest. Have a good weekend. See you tomorrow." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 435. The bank of the stream was not blown up, but many fish in the stream were killed. They turned their white bellies and floated on the muddy water. Sixth brother stared at the stream and suddenly said, "This is better than the primordial 13 arrows. Any talisman master can use it, but the manufacturing process is a little more particular. It is difficult for the craftsmen in the Ministry of Works to make it. Moreover, most talisman masters are weak, so it is difficult for them to get close to the city wall on the battlefield. These small iron kettles that can explode are used to attack the city, and they're always successful. If, as you said, there are more talisman masters, and they're all as strong as youngest brother, the Tang army will definitely sweep the world without any scruples." Fourth senior brother murmured. The paleness on his face gradually faded away. His usually calm eyes were still filled with shock, as well as some other extremely complicated emotions. Master Yin, say, really has a unique vision. I always thought that although my junior brother's aptitude in talisman Taoism was excellent, it was not as good as the calligraphy addict. Thinking of the talisman arrow last year, I realized that what Master Yinsei valued most was the fantastic ideas in your mind that were completely not limited by the rules. He suddenly made a deep bow to Ning Quebec. Ning K was startled and hurriedly avoided. Fourth brother straightened up, looked at his eyes, and said very seriously, "Talisman masters in the eyes of the world are powerful, but they are often restrained in the battle. Today, youngest brother, your wonderful ideas let talisman masters have offensive weapons. I thank you on behalf of all the talisman masters in the world. Don't tell others about this for the time being. It must be kept secret." Fourth brother murmured, "I have to ask the teacher first. It is too dangerous, too dangerous." There were countless dead fish by the stream, and the water wheel was broken. Ninkei walked to the iron plate and tried to dig out the fragments of the small iron kettle deeply embedded in the iron plate. However, he found that he could not dig them out with his own strength. He could not help but say, "This is not scientific." According to his design and calculation, the fire talisman burned in the small iron kettle. Because there was too little air in the iron kettle, even if it could successfully explode, it should be far less powerful than the experimental results. So he thought it was not scientific. Suddenly, he remembered that when he activated the talisman paper, he had sent some great spirit into the small iron kettle. In essence, the Great Spirit was the absolutely pure chi of heaven and earth. When a talisman made by a talisman master was not very powerful, if the talisman paper was provided with sufficient pure chi of heaven and earth, the power of the talisman could be greatly enhanced. This was the method that he had thought of when he accepted the challenge from monk Guan Hai of the Lang Temple and meditated for half a day by the Yiming Lake. Previously, he had poured some great spirit into the small iron kettle, which was equivalent to pouring liquid oxygen into the small iron kettle. The liquid oxygen helped the fire talisman burn fiercely, which made the power of the explosion much greater. Apart from himself, could other talisman masters do this? Ning Ke stood by the stream, frowning and thinking hard. He thought that if he really wanted to use this method on the battlefield, the talisman master needed to have a strong enough control over the chi of heaven and earth. In other words, this method had a high requirement for the talisman master's state. There were very few talisman masters in the world, and there were even fewer talisman masters who could enter the upper see-through state. It seemed that it was still wishful thinking to rely on the small iron kettle to change the pattern of the war in the world. However, it could at least change the situation of the battle. The loud noise by the stream startled the people in the back of the mountain of the academy. However, the first to arrive at the stream was not a person, but the proud big white goose. The big white goose looked at the murky stream water and the dead fish floating on the surface. Perhaps it was sad that its pet had been killed. It straightened its neck and squawked at the three people on the other side of the river. It seemed especially angry. Fourth brother and sixth brother walked directly behind Ning Ke and kept silent. Ning Ke thought bitterly, was this the meaning of the dead younger brother, but not the dead senior brother? He did not want to fight with this guy by the stream. This guy looked very strong, and even if he won, there would be no glory. He hurriedly comforted, "Don't be angry, don't be angry. Tomorrow I will buy 2 baskets of fish and pour them into the stream to play with you. Wooden fish, don't be angry. This is a sacrifice that must be made for the progress of science." The big white goose second brother raised was called Wooden Fish. The brothers in the back of the mountain of the academy did not know why second brother gave the big white goose such a name. No one in the academy cultivated Buddhism. According to Seven Sisters' private analysis, it was probably because second brother habitually used the stick on his head to discipline the big white goose, just like knocking on wooden fish. That was why the big white goose was named Wooden Fish. Seventh sister could discuss and guess at will, but the other brothers did not dare to ask second brother for confirmation. After all, the proud big white goose had never shown the sacred beast of the Buddhism sect. It would not resist when people knocked on its head, and it would accept it submissively. For example, at this moment, no matter how Ning Ke comforted it, it was ready to jump over the stream and fight with him. Fortunately, second brother came at this time, and the big white goose sadly shook its butt and left. Eldest brother also came. He looked at the stream for a long time and looked at Ning Ke blankly. He slowly asked. Teacher was taking a nap and was woken up by the noise. He asked me to come and ask what happened. Second brother respectfully said, when teacher and senior brother traveled, the back of the mountain was often like this. It happened after youngest brother entered the academy. Ning Ke thought to himself, why does this sound like a complaint? Fourth brother nodded and said, today's test is the small iron kettle designed by youngest brother. Ning Ke explained the small iron kettle to the 2 senior brothers. Sixth brother took out 2 small iron kettles from the smithy and handed them to the 2 senior brothers. Eldest brother looked at the carved little iron kettle in his hand and praised, using space to suppress the fire and then using the fire to attack space. Using the theory of firecrackers in a talisman battle, youngest brother's design is indeed wonderful and interesting. But everything needs air to burn. Even fire talismans are no exception. This is the reason why fire talismans cannot be used in the depths of the ocean, but I don't know why youngest brother's fire talisman burns so fiercely. Hearing this, Ning Ke immediately admired eldest brother from the bottom of his heart. Only then did he understand why eldest brother was always the head of the academy. The knowledge related to burning was, of course, easy for him, but he did not expect eldest brother to understand it so thoroughly and instantly think of the problem. Eldest brother might be slow in everything, but his thinking was fast. Ning Ke privately told eldest brother about how to use it and the matters related to the Great Spirit. Eldest brother thought for a moment and came to the same conclusion. Cultivators who could use small iron kettles must be able to make more powerful moves than small iron kettles. It seemed that those small iron kettles were the most suitable for Ninkei in his current state. However, eldest brother did not think that Ninkei was doing useless work, or that it was just a trick. He seemed to have guessed Ninkei's intention of making small iron kettles. Eldest brother did not point it out, but just sighed and left the stream. Ninkei stood by the stream and thought for a moment, and then left as well. On the meadow, second brother's little attendant was feeding wolves, horses, geese, and old cattle. The little fellow was responsible for the food and daily life of these guys in the back of the mountain of the academy. In the past, Ninkei fed the big black horse precious food, such as sealwort from sixth brother. Only now did he know that those were all dug up by 11th brother when he tasted the hundreds of grasses and flowers in the back of the mountain. Every time he thought of this, he was very envious of these guys' food and treatment. After talking with the little attendant for a while, Ninkei inquired about second brother's plans in the afternoon and confirmed that second brother would not appear in the pavilion in the middle of the lake in the afternoon. Ninkei played with the big black horse for a while, galloping wildly on the meadow for a while, and then quietly went to the pavilion in the middle of the lake. Seventh sister was sitting in the pavilion in the middle of the lake with her head down to embroider. The lake light shone on her face through the embroidery frame, making her look extraordinarily beautiful. Ninkei sat beside her and said with a smile, "Senior sister, second brother is not in the pavilion. Why do you have to pretend to be elegant and quiet?" Seventh sister raised her head and stared at him fiercely. She said, "When did I pretend?" Ninkei joked, "Didn't you hear the loud noise by the stream?" Seventh sister said, "Do you think I am like a scholar who can be deaf whenever I want? Then why didn't you go to see the fun?" "I don't like to see the fun." "Look, this is what you're doing." "Can you say that again?" "I mean, every time there's fun in the back of the mountain, senior sister is always the first one to arrive. You are really warm-hearted and kind." Seventh sister said sarcastically, "I don't know what strange things you have come up with this time. I don't want to see them. It is more important to guard my pavilion." The pavilion in the middle of the lake was destroyed by Ninkei's talisman arrow last time. Ninkei said, "Speaking of which, I have really found something interesting recently." Seventh sister's eyes were already a little dazzled from embroidery, and she was already a little tired of pretending to be elegant and quiet. Hearing this, her eyes suddenly lit up and she asked, "What is it? From the underworld market?" Ninkei shook his head, took out the house drawing of the Yinming Lake, and put it on the embroidery frame in front of her. He said, "I bought a large house a few days ago." Seventh sister looked at the lake line on the drawing and said, "It is really good to live near the lake." Ninkei said, "This lake is the left eye of the god's stunning array." Seventh sister was slightly stunned. She looked up at him and did not speak. Ninkei pointed to the Yinming Lake on the drawing and said, "I want to use the left eye of the god's stunning array to set up a tactical array in these houses by the lake. But senior sister, you know I'm a little stupid in this aspect. When I asked you to set up a few array flags, you could set them askew. So you are not stupid, but an idiot." Seventh sister corrected him. Ninkei asked, "Senior sister, are you interested?" Seventh sister's eyes were getting brighter and brighter. She had long been attracted by the drawing and did not look at him. She said, "Of course, setting up an array is more interesting than embroidery." Ninkei nervously rubbed his hands and said, "Can it be done in 100 days?" Seventh sister said, "What kind of tactical array do you want to set up? To kill people or to guard against people?" Ninkei said, "Is there a kind of tactical array that can transmit my psyche power to every corner of the lake?" Seventh sister waved her hand and said, "That is easy. 10 days will do. See you tomorrow." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 436. Ninkei did not see Chan Pippi and Tang Xiaodang at the back of the mountain of the academy. He could not help but feel curious. When he left the back of the mountain and passed by the old library, he went upstairs to read some books. He saw third sister Yulian by the east window and bowed to her. Unexpectedly, she did not know where Tang Xiaodang was. Was Chen Pippi really in love with Tang Xiaodang? He smiled as he thought about it. Then his expression became a little solemn. Some things belong to everyone. It's meaningless to worry about them. Yulian put down the pen in her hand and looked up at him. She said, "For example, your business will always be your business, and you can only handle it yourself." It was already the deepest part of late spring. The east window was sheltered from the blazing sun. The wind filtered through the green trees outside the window was not dry yet. But in the forest by the wetland, cicadas were already singing. Ninkei understood the meaning of senior sister's words. Looking at her innocent cheeks and mature and quiet eyes, he suddenly felt that he seemed to have forgotten something very important, which was related to senior sister. The summer wind finally spread from the sea to the depths of the continent. The West Hill Divine Kingdom was located in the southwest of the Tang Empire. It was closer to the sea, so summer came earlier here. The abundant rain and warm air stimulated the plants on Peach Mountain to grow excitedly. Countless green plants grew on the beautiful white jade cliffs. The greenery covered the whole mountain, arching around the numerous Taoist temples on the broken cliffs, adding a touch of beauty to the solemnity of this place. There was a stone house in a remote corner of the third cliff. Compared to the luxuriant surroundings, the stone house looked extremely monotonous and even a little withered. There were few people around. The stone house was not completely enclosed. On the side facing the cliff plateau, there were dozens of air holes. Light shone in through those air holes. Although they were not like windows, they could at least bring some light. There was a desk under the air holes. Yi Hongyu sat by the desk and looked at the paper on the desk quietly. She looked very focused, as if all her attention was attracted by the paper and nothing else. It was a letter from the Sword Garret of South Jin Kingdom. There was a sword made with clumsy techniques and lines on the paper. She had been sitting in the stone house and reading the sword on the paper for a few days. Her food and drink were all sent by the servants of the judicial department. She did not know that the cliffs outside the stone house had already turned red and green. She did not know that the seasons had changed from spring to summer, and she did not care about the change of attitude of the people in the divine hall towards her. One night in summer, someone came to the stone house. The door of the stone house was slowly pushed open, revealing Chun Bachi's seemingly respectful face. Chun Bachi looked at the young girl in a blue Taoist robe beside the desk and greedily admired the graceful figure under the Taoist robe. After a moment, he lowered his head and said, "The commander awaits your reply." Chun Bachi was an official of the judicial department and was once the commander of the cavalrymen of the Divine Hall. The commander he mentioned was naturally not himself, but Luo Kadi, the Divine Guard commander with a special status in the Divine Hall. Hearing this, Yi Hongyu did not react. She still sat by the table and flipped through the book in front of her. The letter with the sword on it had been inserted into the book by her. Seeing her indifferent reaction, Chun Bachi was not surprised. He smiled mockingly and continued. The commander knelt in front of the hierarch for a whole night yesterday. Yi Hongyu's slender fingers that were flipping through the book froze slightly. Her gaze on the book became more and more indifferent. The Lord Commander is very sincere towards you. Even the sect master has sensed this. The Lord Commander has asked me to pass on a message to you. He hopes that you will be able to understand this point. Chun Bachi did not say anything more. In his opinion, since even the hierarch had expressed his tacit consent to this matter, she was just a Tao addict who had been crippled. She had no right to refuse. Yi Hongyu did not refuse, nor did she say that she needed some time to consider like last time. She did not turn around to look at Chun Bachi. She did not condense a sword with her angry and cold eyes. She just remained silent. She silently looked at the book on the table, and then continued to flip until she reached the place where the letter was. Looking at the crooked sword on the paper, she said indifferently, "Even with you, there is still not enough time." Chun Bachi did not hear clearly what she said. Yi Hongyu took out the letter and tore it. She did not tear the letter into pieces. Instead, she used her nimble fingers to carefully tear the sword off the letter along the crooked and uneven ink lines. After a moment, a small, thin, and crooked paper sword appeared between her slender fingers. "What do you think this is?" Yi Hongyu held the paper sword with 2 fingers and asked Chenbachi. Chenbachi frowned and looked at the piece of paper. He could not understand it. Yi Hongyu said, "You can't even understand this. No wonder you're always blind." After saying this, she stretched her right hand forward and stabbed the paper sword between her fingers towards Chenbachi's eyebrows. Chenbachi used to be the commander of the cavalrymen of Divine Hall and had the cultivation of the upper see-through state. Even when Yi Hongyu was at her peak, he was only slightly weaker than her. Now, Yi Hongyu's cultivation state had already fallen to the lower see-through state and might even fall into the no-doubt state. She was no longer the Tao addict from before. Why would he be afraid? Looking at the paper sword stabbing towards his eyebrows, Chenbachi was shocked and slightly angry. A mocking smile immediately appeared on his face. In his eyes, the paper sword that was about the length of a finger was extremely ridiculous. He thought to himself, she would rather die than bow her head? Then she could only wait to be humiliated. However, the next moment, the mocking smile on his face suddenly froze, because he clearly felt a vast and boundless aura gushing out from the thin paper sword and instantly enveloped his body. It was a mighty sword style. Chenbachi seemed to see endless yellow water rushing towards him. He seemed to see the surging river at the junction of the South Jin Kingdom and the Great River Kingdom leaving the ground and slapping towards his eyes. He was terrified, and his Taoist heart suddenly became wet and cold. Only then did he understand that the paper sword was not ridiculous. It was him who was ridiculous. His pupils suddenly contracted, and he wanted to save himself. However, the sword style on the thin paper had already descended between his eyebrows. Puff, puff. There were 2 very slight puffs. 2 extremely thin blood lines appeared on Chenbachi's eyes. 2 lines of blood were drawn across his black pupils and the whites of his eyes. After a moment, the 2 lines of blood rose up and down. Blood and the juice in his eyeballs flowed out. Pain and darkness occupied Chenbachi's consciousness. What sword is this? He covered his eyes and fell to the ground. He kept rolling in pain and let out a desperate howl like a dying beast. Yi Hongyu stood up and untied the slanted front of her green Taoist robe. She undid the belt of her underwear and put the paper sword between her fingers against her soft skin. Feeling the paper sword against her delicate skin, she became extremely calm. Looking at Chenbachi, who was rolling under her feet, she said softly, "I know you like to see my body. My clothes are unbuttoned now," she said. Chenbachi covered his face and howled in pain. Blood and gelatin-like liquid seeped through his fingers. Yi Hongyu looked at him and said calmly, "It's a pity that you can't see it anymore." Late that night, in early summer, Chenbachi, the former commander of the cavalrymen of Divine Hall, was attacked and blinded. The once proud Tao addict, Yi Hongyu, who was later forgotten, ignored, humiliated, and hurt, left Peach Mountain under the cover of the night. No one knew where she went after that. A few days later, the Divine Hall delegation that went to Chong and city of the Tang Empire returned to West Hill. According to normal calculations, the West Hill delegation should have returned a few days earlier. However, for some reason, the delegation took a detour to the South Jin Kingdom and was delayed. The carriage slowly drove on the steep but not dangerous stone path of the West Hill Divine Palace. The deacons and officials in the delegation all noticed that the atmosphere in the Divine Hall was a little strange today. Wherever the luxurious black carriage with gold embroidery passed, the people in the Divine Hall would retreat and then respectfully kneel by the side of the road to salute. However, there was something else in their expressions other than awe. Chung Li Shue, the priest of the Revelation Department, lifted the curtains and looked at the people kneeling under the green trees to welcome the great divine priest. He could not help but frown when he saw the uneasy expressions on their faces. Did something really happen? He muttered to himself and then turned to look at the great divine priest of Revelation who was resting in the carriage. He respectfully asked, "I'll go and have a look." The great divine priest of Revelation was silent. The carriage of the delegation traveled between the cliffs and the temple. There was still a cliff's distance from the Divine Hall of Revelation. Chung Lishua walked out of the carriage and looked at the cavalrymen of the Divine Hall who were gathering in front of him. His face became a little gloomy. Chung Lishua walked in front of the cavalrymen of the Divine Hall. The cavalrymen of the Divine Hall all saluted, but because they were already wearing armor, no one got off their horses. He looked at Chun Bachi, whose eyes were wrapped in bandages, and noticed that the former cavalry commander's face was extremely gloomy. He could not help but frown and ask, "What happened?" Chun Bachi gritted his teeth and said, "Yi Hongyu betrayed the Judicial Department and the Divine Hall. I was ordered by Commander Luo to gather the cavalrymen and prepare to hunt her down in the world." Yi Hongyu betrayed the Divine Hall? Chung Lishue frowned slightly. His snow-like hair became even colder. Ever since the great divine priest of Revelation predicted that something big would happen to the Judicial Department, he had been very worried. The delegation specially went to the Sword Garret of the South Jin Kingdom for this matter. However, he did not expect that it would still happen. He looked at Shinbachi and said in a low voice, "I remember that your position as the cavalry commander was taken away from you in the wilderness last year. When was it restored?" "Just the day before yesterday. Luo Kadi is the commander of the Divine Guards. When can he intervene in the affairs of the Judicial Department?" Chung Lishua looked at Shinbachi expressionlessly and said, "You are just a subordinate of the Judicial Department. How dare you be rude to the Grand Master Yi Hongyu? Isn't that disrespecting your superior?" In the Divine Hall, as an official of the Judicial Department, Chun Bachi was not afraid of the priest of the Revelation Department. Moreover, he was blinded by Yi Hongyu's paper sword. He was only thinking about revenge and how to capture Yi Hongyu back to the West Hill to torture and humiliate her. How could he care about Chung Lishua's attitude? He said coldly, "This is also the order of the great divine priest of judgment." Chung Lishua was silent. If this was really the order of the great divine priest of judgment, then he could not oppose it. At this moment, the luxurious carriage slowly drove over. An old voice came from the carriage. "The Judicial Department does not represent the Divine Hall. I'm back. There's one more chapter today. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 437. The great divine priest of Revelation was in the carriage. The proud cavalrymen of Divine Hall could no longer sit on their horses. There was no such thing as not wearing armor in front of the great divine priest. They hurriedly dismounted and knelt in front of the carriage. Shinbachi's expression became extremely ugly. With the help of his attendants, he slowly knelt down. Yi Hongyu left the Judicial Department, but it doesn't mean that she betrayed the Divine Hall, because leaving is not betrayal. There was a sigh in the carriage. Chung Lishue felt the great divine priest of Revelation's disappointment and sadness, so he also became angry and sad. His snow-like hair fluttered faster and faster. He looked at Chun Bachi, who was kneeling in front of the carriage, expressionlessly, and said coldly, "Go and accept your punishment." Chun Bachi suddenly raised his head and looked at Chung Lishue. If his eyes were not wrapped in bandages, he would have been able to see the resentment in his eyes. Last year in the Palace of the Wilderness, it was Chung Lishue who made him suffer the painful punishment of thorns. Now he was blind. It was Yi Hongyu who had betrayed the Divine Hall. Why should he accept the punishment? The mountain breeze of early summer blew by the palace on the cliff and lifted the curtain of the carriage, revealing an old hand. The hand landed on the window lattice and was slowly knocking. It was the hand of the great divine priest of Revelation. The cavalrymen and deacons of Divine Hall lowered their heads and did not dare to look at the hand. Chun Bachi could not see it, so he still looked over there with a resentful expression. The old hand slowly knocked on the window. A faint aura shrouded the scene. When the people beside the carriage heard the light, knocking sound, a strange and terrifying feeling welled up in their hearts. Someone saw Chanbachi's face and almost fell to the ground in horror. Chanbachi didn't feel or see anything, so he still looked resentful and even tried to defend himself. However, he opened his mouth but could not speak. He reached out to touch his mouth and found that his fingers touched something slightly wet and sticky. Then he felt something sweet in his mouth. Only then did he realize what had happened. The resentful expression on his face suddenly turned into incomparable horror and despair. His tongue was gone. There was only blood and minced meat in his mouth. Seeing Chun Bachi's mouth dripping with pus and blood, the crowd was terrified. Someone could not help but exclaim. Several cavalrymen of Divine Hall subconsciously wanted to step forward, but suddenly realized that this must be the punishment of the great divine priest in the carriage. They trembled and stopped. The voice of the great divine priest of Revelation rang in the carriage again. You shouldn't have spoken. Can't talk. But you have to pass the message on behalf of someone else. Then don't talk anymore. After dealing with the cavalrymen of Divine Hall, the luxurious carriage continued to move towards the 4 magnificent Divine Halls at the top of Peach Mountain without any delay. In the dark carriage, the great divine priest of Revelation quietly looked at the early summer scenery of Peach Mountain. After a long silence, he suddenly said, I don't want to and shouldn't care about the affairs of the judicial department. But now it seems that I have to care. So I have to. Chung Lishue was silent. Looking at the old and tired face of the great divine priest of Revelation, he suddenly had a strong dislike for the bigwig on the seat of heavenly black jade. The carriages of the diplomatic corps had already dispersed. Only the black gold carriage of the great divine priest of Revelation was left. It slowly drove to the highest point of the Divine Hall and came to the solemn black Divine Hall. The carriage seemed extremely small and lonely in front of the huge and magnificent Divine Hall. However, everyone who saw the carriage, no matter which deacon of the Divine Hall they were from, was shocked and awed. They were awed by the great divine priest of Revelation in the carriage. They were shocked that the great divine priest of Revelation actually appeared in front of the Divine Hall of Judgment. For countless years, the 3 most honorable great divine priests in the West Hill Divine Palace would never enter other divine halls because of their respect for each other and their own pride. People knelt before the stone steps of the Divine Hall, beside the stone pillars, and by the road. They looked at the carriage anxiously, not knowing what had happened today. They saw the old, great divine priest of Revelation slowly walk out of the carriage, up the stone steps, and into the black divine hall of judgment. Many people exclaimed in their hearts. The great divine priest of Revelation was very old and very thin. However, when he walked into the divine hall of judgment, he seemed very tall, as if he was about to touch the top of the divine hall of judgment. He walked on a flat stone ground, and all the people of the judicial department knelt down to greet him. No matter what the arrival of the great divine priest of Revelation meant to the judicial department, no one except the great divine priest of judgment was qualified to express their emotions. The great divine priest of Revelation walked into the divine hall of judgment and stood in front of the empty and monotonous hall. Looking at the bead curtain in the distance, he stopped and did not move forward. He came to talk to someone, so he wanted to walk into the divine hall of judgment. However, if he continued to walk into the divine hall, the bad-tempered guy behind the bead curtain would definitely think that he was looking for a fight. The great divine priest of West Hill was also a human being, and a human being must have emotions. The great divine priest of Revelation looked at the figure on the seat of heavenly black jade in the distance and said, I went to the South Gene Kingdom and brought back someone's ashes. The bead curtain in the depths of the divine hall moved without any wind, vaguely revealing the seat of heavenly black jade. The great divine priest of judgment held his chin in his hand and looked down without saying anything. The great divine priest of Revelation shook his head and said, You shouldn't do these things. The great divine priest of judgment still did not look up and said indifferently, So what? Under Hao Yin and above the seat of heavenly God, do I still need to lower my head to Lu Bai? After a long silence, the great divine priest of Revelation said, Before senior brother of light left, you did not need to lower your head. But after he left, you could only sit on the seat of heavenly black jade. Your head was originally lowered. The great divine priest of light's escape from the secluded pavilion caused a great shock in the West Hill Divine Palace. Few people knew that this old man, who was known as the strongest divine priest of light in hundreds of years, had pushed down the confinement built by the great divine priest of judgment with his natal divine power. But almost no one knew that the old man had pushed down the confinement and brought great harm to the great divine priest of judgment. After such a long time, the great divine priest of judgment still could not leave the seat of heavenly black jade. The great divine priest of revelation naturally knew. That was why he said that. The great divine priest of judgment sat on the seat of heavenly black jade that seemed to be condensed from the blood of thousands of people. He supported his chin with his hand and seemed to be thinking, but his violent and powerful head was indeed lowered. He slowly raised his head, and his deep eyes were full of indifference and violence. He looked outside the bead curtain and saw the great divine priest of revelation standing far away. He said, "I can raise my head at any time." In the empty and chilling black Taoist temple, a gust of wind suddenly rose. The people of the West Hill Divine Palace did not know what had happened in the Divine Hall of Judgment. They did not know what the great divine priest of revelation had said and done after entering the Divine Hall of Judgment, nor did they know what this historic meeting meant. They only heard the sound of the wind. The sound of the violent wind was even more terrifying than the hurricane on the East Sea of the Kingdom of Song. It was as if countless giants were roaring and fighting. A storm swept out from the Divine Hall, blowing the gravel on the stone steps and hitting the stone pillars. People knelt on the ground in fear, but they could not stabilize their bodies at all. After a long time, the sound of the wind stopped, and so did the wind. The great divine priest of revelation walked out of the Divine Hall of Judgment. His body was still stable, and his expression was still calm. But the wrinkles around his eyes seemed to have deepened. People watched in awe as the great divine priest of revelation walked down the stone steps. They found that he did not enter the carriage, but walked to the highest point of Peach Mountain, the holiest white Taoist temple. They were shocked and guessed. The great divine priest of revelation left the Divine Hall of Judgment. He did not return to his own divine hall. Instead, he walked to the place where Haoyin Taoism was supreme in the world. The highest and holiest white Taoist temple belonged to the hierarch of the West Hill Divine Palace. People did not know why the great divine priest of revelation went to see the great divine priest of judgment first, and then the hierarch lord. Similarly, they could not see with their own eyes what happened in the sacred white temple. All they heard was countless thunders coming from the white temple and resounding throughout the entire Peach Mountain. There was a light curtain in the deepest part of the white divine hall. The light curtain was composed of the purest Haoyin divine flame. It contained unimaginable power and pressure. The light curtain represented Haoyin's rule over the world. A figure landed on this holy screen of divine radiance. The figure on the light curtain was extremely tall. It was as if his feet were on the earth, and his head was above the blue sky, forcibly separating heaven and earth. Every word the figure said was like a bolt of lightning. That was the supreme ruler of Haoyin Taoism in the world, the hierarch lord of the West Hill Divine Palace. The great divine priest of revelation bowed slightly to the giant figure on the light curtain. A voice sounded from behind the light curtain. "Revelation, you think too much." This voice was very calm, but when it passed through the holy screen of light, it caused the light to tremble slightly. Then, it turned into the sound of thunder above the ninth heaven. The great divine priest of revelation looked at the giant figure and said calmly, "The Tao addict is the future of the Divine Hall. Those stupid people actually forced her away. I can't accept it. Hierarch Lord, you kept silent on this matter. In my opinion, it is also very stupid." The great divine priest of West Hill had a high and special status. However, it was still unimaginable for him to say that the hierarch lord was stupid. What was even more unimaginable was that the hierarch lord behind the light curtain was not angry after hearing this. Instead, he fell into a long period of thinking. The Tao addict can't return to the temple. I know. She is already useless. Maybe. The Divine Hall needs power. She can still be power. Revelation said expressionlessly, "I can see further than you." After the great divine priest of light left, The great divine priest of revelation was naturally the one who could see further and more accurately in the whole Peach Mountain. This was something that even the gigantic figure in the boundless light had to admit. Maybe you are right. The thunder gradually stopped. Revelation left. There is one more chapter. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 438. The commander of the West Hill Divine Palace Divine Guards, Luo Kadi, was a tall, middle-aged man. When he put on his armor, he looked like a mobile metal fortress. However, when he knelt in front of that screen of light, in front of that enormous figure, he was as humble as a dwarf, as if he was a thin and weak servant. Because he was the most loyal servant of the hierarch lord of the West Hill Divine Palace. He was the guard dog of the Peach Mountain of the West Hill Divine Palace. The Divine Hall needs power, more than ever before. Since the red fish has left, you'll be responsible for taking her back. If she no longer has any power, then I'll allow you to kill her for the dignity of the Divine Hall. Afterwards, you'll have to find some other kind of power. The hierarch lord stood in the light and said calmly. Luo Kadi kowtowed like a collapsing mountain. The great divine priest of revelation returned to his throne. He gently stroked the throne made of sunflower vines with his old palms and looked at the hundreds of deacons and officials of the Revelation Department kneeling on the ground of the Divine Hall. The wrinkles on his face were as deep as the cracks on the cliffs of Peach Mountain. Chung Lishue waved his hand to dismiss the people who came to greet the great divine priest. Then he walked to the great divine priest and said in a low voice, "It has happened after all." The great divine priest of revelation said, "This is not the big event that I have predicted." Chung Lishue was shocked and speechless. If the Tao Addict's betrayal of the Peach Mountain was not a big event, then what was the big event that the great divine priest predicted would happen to the judicial department? That really big event has not happened yet. The great divine priest of revelation said tiredly, "All the fates in the world are predetermined by Hao Yin." The wheel of fate in the Buddhism sect actually means the same thing. What should happen is destined to happen, but it will happen later. Perhaps it was because of tiredness, or because of the continuous meetings with the great divine priest of judgment and the hierarch lord, the wrinkles around the great divine priest of revelation's eyes became more and more frightening. Chung Lishue looked at the wrinkles around the old man's eyes and felt worried. But he did not dare to ask directly. He asked tentatively, "Where is Yihong Yu now?" The great divine priest of revelation said with a smile, "This kind of thing does not need to be predicted. Since the Tao Addict has left the West Hill, she must have gone to Chang'an." Chung Lishue's expression changed slightly. He didn't understand why the great divine priest was so sure. The Haotian divine light shines on the world. Where else can she live except in Chang'an? The great divine priest of revelation sighed and then said with a smile, "Fortunately, Chang'an is a good city. We can see and learn some interesting things." Chung Lishue listened to the great divine priest's evaluation of Chang'an and city and suddenly thought of his experience at the side gate of the academy. He frowned slightly and said, "That is indeed an interesting city. He Mingxi actually sensed Ning Kei's divine skill earlier than me when Ning Kei fought with Lu Yiqing at the side gate of the academy. He Mingxi was the disciple of Li Qingshan, the nation master of Tang. At the side door of the academy, Ning Kei had slashed at Lu Yiqing with his blade, and the divine light had shone brightly. The cultivators present could not understand it all. Only Chung Lishue and He Mingxi had reacted. Chung Lishue crashed through the wall of the carriage. He Mingxi crushed the carriage wheel. Chung Lishue was the Grand Master of the Revelation Department of the West Hill Divine Palace. It was not surprising that he could judge Ning Kei's divine skill so quickly. How could He Mingxi do the same? Recalling the scene at that time, Chung Lishue frowned and said, "I can confirm that He Mingxi's state should be higher than mine. He is definitely not as weak as the rumors say." For hundreds of years, the greatest wish of the West Hill Divine Palace has been to invite the South School of Haotian back. Other than the boring dignity and reputation, of course, it is also because the people in the South School are extraordinary. Since younger brother Qin Shan is the nation master of Tang, how can his successor be as weak as the rumors say? The great divine priest of revelation said slowly, I don't know how the Tao addict's trip to Chong and will affect the relationship between the divine hall and the South School. After all, it is a matter for the future. Cheng Lishue thought about what had happened in the divine hall and the attitudes of the hierarch lord and the great divine priest of judgment. He said bitterly, I think it will be difficult for the Tao addict to return to Peach Mountain. The great divine priest of revelation shook his head and said, she will come back eventually. Cheng Lishue was puzzled and said, why are you so sure? The great divine priest of revelation sighed and said, if she doesn't return to Peach Mountain, how can the destined event of the judicial department happen? Summer came to West Hill, and so did Chong. The early summer in Chong and was not unbearably hot. However, the sun in the sky was so hot that people began to feel annoyed. The bluestone slabs in the afternoon began to heat up. The renovation of the Yinming Lake was still going on. In order to finish the project before the arrival of summer, the construction team greatly accelerated under the pressure of money and the Fish Dragon Gang. From morning to night, the sound of knocking and grinding echoed in the house by the lake. Fortunately, the original residents had already moved away. Otherwise, they would be tortured by the noise as the weather got hotter. Who knew what kind of conflicts would occur? As time went by, the project entered the final stage. Ning Ke took the tactical array drawing carefully drawn by Seventh Sister and began to go deep into the construction. After all, the money was in place. Mr. Chi of the Fish Dragon Gang was too famous. Therefore, although the construction workers thought that Ning Ke's design was unreasonable, they did not make too much resistance. The renovation of the house by the lake gradually took shape, and Seventh Sister's tactical array gradually took shape. Then it was hidden among the flowers and plants on the white walls. The project was not finished. Ning Ke and Sang Sang still lived in the old brushpen shop. Knowing that they were going to move, the merchants on Lin 47th Street were relieved, but they could not help but feel a little sad. They thought that if this bigwig left, the men in black from the Fish Dragon Gang would definitely not volunteer to maintain the security here, and the government runners of the Chong and local government would definitely not come here several times a day. Ning Ke did not know what people were thinking. He was really busy these days. He had to study in the back of the mountain of the academy, keep an eye on the renovation of the lakeside, and often go to the palace. The purpose of entering the palace, of course, was to enter the small wooden building. He had to shoulder the safety of the whole Chong and city, and it was related to his plan. Therefore, he had to get familiar with the God-stunning array as soon as possible. Everyone praised his talent in talisman Taoism, and talisman Taoism was originally an interlinked skill. According to reason, he should be able to master the formation that his master Yen Sei left for him very soon. However, it was a pity that his talent seemed to be wasted too much on talisman Taoism and various other skills, and he didn't leave much for the formation. However, Ning Ke had never been a person who gave up when faced with difficulties. Since he had to understand and master the big tactical array, these frustrations would not affect him at all. He took out the usual means of making up for his shortcomings with diligence and splitting books with a knife. As long as he had time, he would go to the palace to learn. His Majesty greatly appreciated his attitude and allowed him to enter the palace at any time. When he walked out of the small building wearily, the emperor would not let him go, but would take him to the imperial study. After entering the palace for more than 10 times, he became familiar with the leader of the Yulin royal guards, the bodyguards, the eunuchs, and the palace maids, and even with the empress who ground ink in the imperial study every day. However, he was still not very familiar with the big tactical array of Chong and city. However, this did not mean that he did not gain some benefits from it. Other than some benefits that could not be told to others, the biggest benefit he gained was the countless ancient trees by the Yinming Lake and the things that were continuously sent to the courtyard. The purchase document and the land deed of the house by the Yinming Lake were written with Chao Xiaoshu's name. However, such a big movement could not be hidden from too many people. Li Yu was the first to know about this, so she gave Ning Ke a gift that was absolutely worthy of the identity of the princess of the Tang Empire. The numerous ancient trees that were transplanted by the Yinming Lake were all dug out from her own fiefdom. This was really a great deal, and it could not be bought even with money. His Majesty and the Empress also knew that he was building a new house. The Empress chose a lot of antiques from the palace treasury as a reward, while His Majesty rewarded Ning Ke with many calligraphy treasures. This was the only thing that Ning Ke was not satisfied with. Time gradually passed, and Chang, in city, changed from early summer to midsummer. The cicadas in the academy became louder, and the heat in the city gradually rose. The renovation project by the Yinming Lake was officially completed. More than 10 houses that used to be separated were opened up, and the old walls that were softened by the lake air were repainted. The narrow alley between the houses was transformed into a stone path in the garden. Flowers and plants were in full bloom, which was very quiet and beautiful. The merchants on the Lin 47th Street plucked up their courage. Boss Wu and Aunt Wu, who sold the fake antique shop, took the lead and invited Ning Ke and Sang Sang to a farewell feast. Their time on the Lin 47th Street was finally over. That night, Ning Ke and Sang Sang moved to the house by the Yinming Lake. All the furniture had been bought by the brothers of the Fish Dragon Gang, so Sang Sang did not have a headache about how to fill such a large yard. Under the strong request of Mr. Chi, Ning Ke kept the old brush pen shop. Anyway, Chao Xiaoshu had waived his rent for many years. However, the old brush pen shop would not sell calligraphy anymore. Thinking about it, when the spring rain fell next year, there would be no young calligraphers in the shop called the old brush pen shop, and there would be no middle-aged people holding umbrellas outside the shop. Accompanied by cicadas and unknown insects, Ning Ke and Sang Sang strolled on the stone path by the Yinming Lake. The beautiful houses behind them were their new homes. Countless ancient trees by the lake made the stone path and the houses extremely quiet. The lake wind passed through them, and the temperatures seemed to be a lot lower, compared with the stuffy heat in the streets of Chang, and it was a completely different world. Sang Sang thought of the picture of Ning Ke lying on the bamboo chair outside the back door in the summer 2 years ago, constantly soaking himself with well water and chatting with the neighbors. She could not help but feel that it was a lifetime ago. I never thought that we could live in such a big house. When they lived in a cave in Min Mountain, they lived in a tree house, and they lived in a small courtyard in the city of Wei. They had imagined for many times what kind of big house they would live in when they were rich. Now, when they strolled in their own big house by the lake, they realized how shabby their imagination was. "It's good, isn't it?" Ning Ke asked. Sang Sang nodded and said, "It's better than very good." Fuck, there's one more chapter. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for it. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 439. Standing by the lake. Ning Ke looked back and saw towering green trees, white walls, and black eaves. It was a noble scene. Thinking that this was his home, he could not help but sigh like Sang Sang. He said with great satisfaction, "We will live in a bigger house in the future." Sang Sang was a little surprised. She looked up and said, "Bigger houses than here can only be the Princess Mansion and the Imperial Palace." Ning Ke reached out and took her into his arms. He rubbed her head and said, "We often go to the Princess Mansion and the Imperial Palace. If we really want to live there in the future, I will ask His Majesty." Sang Sang leaned against his chest and laughed happily. The light that leaked through the green leaves of the ancient trees suddenly became much lighter. Ning Ke looked up at the sky and saw a few large clouds floating in the sky above the treetops, blocking the blazing sun. He pushed Sang Sang away and said, "Let's go boating." The little handmaiden was not too uncomfortable with the completely different treatment. She said, "Oh," and walked to the newly built simple mooring on the lakeshore. The wooden stack, which was about a few feet long, extended to the Yinming Lake. There were 2 boats moored in front of the stack. There were oars at the stern and a canopy on the boat. They were very new, which was bought by Ning Quebec. The wooden oars cut through the white clouds and the blue sky on the lake surface. The lake waves gradually rose and swayed to the distance, disturbing the water plants in the clear water and startling the fish in the water plants. The boats left the pier and sailed to the center of the lake. There was a lotus field in the middle of Yinming Lake. Ning Ke was half lying on a bough with his unbuttoned shirt collar. He lay in the shadow of the canopy and smelled the faint lotus fragrance in the wind. He closed his eyes comfortably. Sang Sang stood at the stern and slowly rowed the oars. You should also close your eyes and feel it, Ning Ke said. Sang Sang put down the oars in her hands and walked into the canopy. She leaned against him and closed her eyes. Her sparse eyelashes gently blinked, and her yellowish hair trembled in the lake wind. What do you feel? The wind on the lake is very cool. I'm asking about the aura of heaven and earth. It seems a little stronger than on the shore. Sang Sang opened her eyes and looked at the lotus field not far away. Her thin brows furrowed. Ning Ke took out the map from his arms and pointed at the Yinming Lake, which was about the size of a fingernail. He said, "This lake is the left branch of Chong and City. The imperial court dredged this lake last year. Nominally, the Ministry of Works responded to the request of the Chong and local government, but in fact it was the daily maintenance of the God-stunning array by the Imperial Center Administration." Sang Sang was puzzled and asked, "Then will the imperial court agree to buy the house by the lake? I'm in charge of the array in Chong and City, not to mention this lake." Ning Ke continued, "The reason why I sold everything I had to buy the lakeside house was because of this lake. The big tactical array in Chong and City has never been activated, but it has been operating slowly. Yinming Lake, as the left eye of Qi, naturally needs to gather some Qi of heaven and earth. Although the self-uniform power of heaven and earth is too strong, the concentration here cannot be too special, but it is good for cultivation." Sang Sang nodded, not really understanding. "The most important thing is if I can really control the big tactical array in Chong and City, I can connect the tactical array designed by Seventh Sister for us with the God-stunning array." Ning Ke said, "At that time, I don't need to activate the God-stunning array to startle the world. I also have enough ability to borrow the power of Chong and City and plant a lotus on someone." Sang Sang thought for a moment and said, "It sounds very difficult." Ning Ke thought about the learning in the palace these days and said bitterly, "It's more difficult than very difficult." Sang Sang said, "Young master, I believe you can definitely do it." "I hope so, but there's not much time." Ning Ke looked at the lotus field not far away and thought that the green lotus leaves would all turn into withered yellow leaves in autumn, and that person would also return to Chang'an. He could not help but fall silent. "Let's go to the lotus field over there," he said. Sang Sang stood up from beside him, walked to the stern, and rowed again. "Let's row." Ning Ke's song sounded on the boat on the lake. Yinming Lake was a public forest land owned by the government and was not allowed to be sold. It was impossible for it to become Ning Ke's private property. However, he had bought all the houses by the lake. The imperial court would not take it too seriously because of his status. Yinming Mountain on the south bank was not famous, and there were very few tourists. Therefore, Yinming Lake was in fact the private lake of his house. There was only one boat floating on the beautiful lake. Sealing up such a beautiful scenery and turning it into a private garden that could only be enjoyed by themselves would cut off the opportunity for the people of Chong and to get close to it. Of course, it would seem a little unkind and even morally questionable. However, Ning Ke and his handmaiden were originally nouveau riches and had never been kind people, so they did not care much about moral issues. The lotus field in the middle of the lake was planted by people hired by Ning Quebec. After these days, the lotus leaves were already lush and the flowers were in full bloom after being nourished by the lake mud. Sang Sang moved the oars, and the boat slowly sailed into the lotus field. As far as the eye could see, besides the green lotus leaves and pink lotus flowers, nothing else could be seen. It was as if they had entered a quiet maze, a graceful world that was completely different from the scorching summer. The round green lotus leaves were like cattail leaf fans lying on the surface of the water. They stretched out in midair and touched the walls of the boat from time to time, making a rustling sound. The lotus flowers were in full bloom by the side of the boat. The pink, white, soft, and smooth petals were so close to the two that they could even clearly smell a faint fragrance. Ning Ke leaned on the bow of the boat and looked at the lotus leaves that brushed past him. He held a cattail leaf fan in his hand and waved it gently. His eyes were slightly narrowed as he admired the beautiful scenery of the lotus field. At the same time, he meditated and cultivated. He used the chi cultivation method that he learned when he was in seclusion in the cliff cave to constantly breathe in and out the aura of heaven and earth between the lake and accumulate the Great Spirit in his body. The drop of liquid that was condensed by the Great Spirit in his body was now rounder and fuller. It looked like a drop of water rolling on the lotus leaves and could fall into the lake at any time. The boat went deep into the lotus field. The house by the lake and even the Yinming Mountain on the south bank were all covered by the lotus leaves. Sang Sang put down the oars and sat beside Ning Quebec. She reached out to the side of the boat and picked a lotus head among the leaves. Her little hand slightly tore the fresh lotus that had not been formed for a long time and picked out the pale green lotus seed. She carefully peeled the lotus seed and picked out the thin lotus core inside, and then sent it to Ning Kei's lips. Ning Kei did not open his eyes and ate the lotus seed with her fingertips. When his mouth was full of fragrance, he suddenly opened his eyes and said, "The first lotus core is not bitter. Why bother to pick it out?" Sang Sang had already processed several lotus seeds and fed them all into his mouth. She did not listen to him and still carefully picked out the lotus core. "I heard that the lotus core can be used as medicine. We can't waste it," she said with her head down. Ning Kei was speechless and said, "Anyway, we are a family with a big house now. Why do we have to be so thrifty? If you have the time, you might as well let me write a few more calligraphy pieces." Sang Sang thought for a while and thought it was true. She looked at the lotus core on her knees and made up her mind. She threw the lotus core into the lake and washed her hands in the lake water. Then she walked back to the stern. "Where are you going?" Ning Kei looked at the boat swaying and asked in confusion. Sang Sang said, "When we go back, I will let you write a few more calligraphy pieces. I spent all my money to buy this house. Even if the palace gave me a lot of things, I still owe Mr. Chi a few thousand taels of silver last night." Ning Kei said helplessly, "There is no hurry, right?" Sang Sang laughed and said, "I'm just kidding. Tell me, where are we going at this time?" Ning Kei said, "Just paddle." The boat swam freely in the lotus field. Ning Kei opened the package beside him and took out the small iron can. He carefully touched the deep straight lines on it and found that he really did not have the ability of Sixth Brother. He casually threw the small iron can into the lake. These days, Sixth Brother made a total of more than 30 small iron cans, and now he was still making them in the back of the mountain of the academy. As long as there was time, there would be a continuous supply. The small iron pot was filled with enough weight of scrap iron, which increased the power of the test. Moreover, when thrown into the lake, it could be guaranteed that it would not float. The relatively troublesome thing was the fire foo in the small iron pot. Although Ning Kei's psyche power was much stronger than that of ordinary cultivators, it still made him feel a little tired to make more than 30 foo papers with the most powerful talisman power. Sang Sang rowed. He leaned against the bow of the boat and threw the small iron pot into the lake from time to time, ignoring the fish on the lotus leaves. The boat swam freely, and he threw it casually. This scene seemed to be comfortable and natural, but in fact, he firmly remembered the position of the small iron pot in the lake. The boat moved among the lotuses and the green leaves. The lake water suddenly broke, making a clear and pleasant sound. It was like frogs jumping from the boat into the lake from time to time. When the boat sailed out of the lotus field, the small iron pot had completely sunk into the lake. At this time, the sky was covered by rain and clouds, and no one knew when it was dusk. Ning Kei stood at the bow of the boat and looked at the shore that was getting closer and closer. There was a steep but not high Yinming Mountain on the shore. He squinted his eyes and felt the lake breeze, which was much cooler than yesterday, caressing his cheeks. It was very comfortable. The boat reached the south bank, and the two went ashore into the forest. They picked up the grass along the way and finally reached the peak of Yinming Mountain. The peak was not high, but they could overlook the lake. Ning Kei looked at the courtyard on the north bank of the lake and looked at the looming lines between the trees and eaves. He silently compared it with the tactical array left by Seventh Sister in his heart and confirmed that there was no difference. If Hao Ian can give me enough time to connect this lake with the God-stunning array, then I believe that I can kill anyone I want here. Just after he said this, it seemed that Hao Ian could no longer tolerate his arrogance. A light suddenly flashed in the depths of the dense rain clouds in the sky, and then there was a rumbling thunder. The rain fell without warning and instantly turned into countless water curtains, covering the entire Chang'an city. Yinming Lake and Yinming Mountain were silent in the rain. At the moment when the lightning flashed and thunder roared, Sang Sang opened the big black umbrella as fast as she could. Ning Ke looked up at the black umbrella and said, "It is easy to be struck to death with an umbrella in a thunderstorm." Sang Sang said, "You said that when we were young, but we were not struck to death." Ning Ke sighed and said, "It is indeed a very magical world. Then close your eyes and feel it." The rain was pouring. Thunder and lightning intertwined. Sang Sang stood on the edge of the cliff, facing the turbulent lake water. She closed her eyes and held the handle of the big black umbrella tightly. After some time, Ning Ke asked with a serious expression, "How do you feel?" Sang Sang opened her eyes, which were brighter than the lightning in the rain clouds. "I can feel everything. That's all for today. See you tomorrow. I'm really not used to writing during the day. My eyes are always blurred, but it seems to be efficient. I hope it can continue." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 440. Sang Sang was a little handmaiden. Sang Sang was not an ordinary handmaiden. She had an amazing memory. She could easily remember all the numbers she had seen since she started to count. This could be testified by the soldiers and civilians in the city of Wei. She was very smart. This could be testified by Chun Pippi, who had walked out of the old brush pen shop several times. Chun Pippi was a genius recognized by both Haoyan Taoism and Chang'an Academy. The reason why Sang Sang often seemed a little clumsy or even dull was not that her brain was not good. In Ning Ke's words, she was just a little lazy and did not want to think about many things. Ning Ke knew more about Song Song's special features than anyone else in the world, such as her intelligence and her unique ability. However, in the past 10 years, he had not thought about or touched these special features of Sang Sang. This was his instinctive choice, because he could not understand why he had picked up a little baby girl from a pile of corpses by the roadside of the wasteland in Hebei County. The baby girl seemed to be hiding some secrets, which made him feel a little scared. It was not until the great divine priest of light escaped from the West Hill and came to Chang'an City and took Sang Sang as his disciple. Sang Sang became the next great divine priest of light in the West Hill Divine Palace. Ning Ke then realized that this was the mark of fate on Sang Sang. This was the lucky chance of the little baby girl. Fate and secrets had already appeared in front of him, so there was no more fear. He could only admit and accept it. In the past 6 months, Ning Ke no longer avoided it. Instead, he began to train or explore Song Song's potential in cultivation. Today, there was a thunderstorm by the Yiming Lake. Sang Sang stood on the edge of the cliff, holding the big black umbrella. She said that she felt everything. 2 years ago, on the journey from the city of Wei to Chang'an City, Liu Qingxian once told Ning Ke that when a cultivator first comprehended the range of the qi of heaven and earth that he could feel represented the aptitude of that cultivator. It could even predict which step he would take in the future. Some cultivators could feel a pond, and some could feel a lake. When the Sage of Sword, Liu Bai, was enlightened, he felt a big river. What Ning Ke felt was a warm ocean. However, he had never told anyone about this because even he did not believe that his cultivation potential was stronger than the Sage of Sword, Liu Bai's. In fact, the various stories that happened during his cultivation journey proved that he was wrong. Sang Sang said that she had sensed everything, but it did not mean that she was more powerful than Liu Bai. It meant something else, something that only she and Ning Ke could understand. "You're trying it now?" Sang Sang handed him the big black umbrella. Ning Ke took the big black umbrella. His palms and the umbrella handle were full of rainwater. The psyche power was slowly released from his sense of perception and passed through his palm into the handle of the big black umbrella. Then, it quietly covered the oil-stained surface of the big black umbrella. It passed through the majestic rainstorm and diffused towards Yinming Lake at the bottom of the cliff. Ning Ke also felt a lot. He sensed the lake that was jumping restlessly like boiling water after being hit by the storm. He sensed the lotus leaves in the lotus field that were rattling restlessly like drums. He sensed the frightened frogs under the lotus leaves. He sensed the small iron pots that looked like stones in the depths of the lake. Ning Ke looked up at the sky and tilted the black umbrella backward. The heavy rain immediately soaked his body. The dark clouds in the sky rolled and squeezed. After the dark clouds, there were more dark clouds. Countless raindrops poured down from the layers of dark clouds, looking like countless old black snakes biting each other crazily. Suddenly, an extremely thick and straight bolt of lightning crossed the entire sky from the northwest of Chang and city without warning. It instantly tore apart the rolling rain clouds. The thunder came soon after and exploded above Yiming Lake. Boom! It was unknown whether it was the power of the thunder or something else, but the water of Yinming Lake suddenly fluctuated. Water splashed everywhere, and the lotus branches shook violently, as if they would break at any time. Ning Ke looked down at the surface of the lake that was surging like a fountain. He looked at the waves and broken branches that were gradually dispersing towards the shore. He suddenly said, "Yes." Sang Sang wiped the rain off her face and did not speak. After that terrifying bolt of lightning, the skies seemed to have officially begun to get angry. Bolts of lightning came one after another, illuminating Chang and city, which was originally covered in darkness by the dark clouds. The dull thunder did not show any signs of stopping. The continuous explosions did not give the people in the city any chance to breathe. In the violent thunder, Ning Ke held the black umbrella and looked at the north shore of Yiming Lake. He said something, but because the thunder was too loud and the rain was too violent, only he could hear it. He pointed to the courtyard on the north shore and said, "Start from the courtyard." He pointed to the shaking lake and said, "Continue in the lake." Then he looked at Sang Sang and the Yinming Peak under his feet and said, "End here." Sang Sang took the big black umbrella from him and said, "Don't let him go up the mountain." Ning Ke said after a moment of silence, "I'll try my best. If I still can't kill him in the lake and don't let him go up the mountain, then I'll go down the mountain." Sang Sang said, "What about me if you go down the mountain?" Ning Ke said, "You watch me from the mountain." Sang Sang said, "I can help you. You can definitely help me, but that's before I go down the mountain. And I believe that there will be many people watching that day, such as Second Brother, so you'll be safe." After saying this, Ning Ke walked down the mountain. The heavy rain in midsummer came abruptly and left quickly without any reluctance. When Ning Ke and Sang Sang walked to the lake at the foot of the mountain, the rain stopped. After the rain stopped, they returned to the boat. Ning Ke picked up the boat with one hand and poured out the accumulated rainwater in the cabin. The boat wandered on the Yinming Lake that had calmed down again. After the heavy rain, the air on the lake became extremely clean and fresh. The heat of midsummer was swept away, and the lake wind was filled with the sweet smell of broken green branches. The boat sailed into a corner of the lotus field. Here, the lotus branches were broken, the lotus flowers were broken, and the lake water was turbid. It looked very miserable. No matter how powerful the thunder and lightning in the sky was, it could not cause such a scene. Some traces of iron slag could be vaguely seen on the broken lotus leaves floating on the lake. Ning Ke looked at the broken lotus branches in the lake and said with a smile, "Keep the broken lotus and listen to the thunder." Tuyang City was located in the northeast border of the Tang Empire. It was near Min Mountain and the wilderness. Even in midsummer, it was extremely cool. After the summer, the rain gradually increased, but thunder was rarely heard. There was more rain, but it didn't mean that people could dig lakes and plant lotuses like in the south. Only the general's mansion had a lotus pond in Tuyang City. Only a few people could see the wilted lotus. Naturally, Not many people in this border town would lament about the wilted lotus like the poets and scholars. However, when the people in Tiang City saw the broken Tang Empire cavalry in the meadow outside the city, they could not help but be shocked, and even shocked to the point of speechlessness. For many years, the Tang Empire's army had not suffered any losses. The northeast border military led by General Xiahou had never lost a battle. Why was the cavalry outside the city a broken army? In fact, this was just a misunderstanding that was not good. The Tang Empire cavalry on the meadow outside Tuyang City did not lose the battle in the wilderness. It was just that after a long journey, their armor was stained with dust, their horses were tired, and the people were tired. Most importantly, all of their faces were filled with numbness. The team was filled with an atmosphere of decline, so they were mistaken for a broken army. The reason why the Tang Empire soldiers were numb was the desolate man in the forest not far away. The man's leather robe had long been tattered. Blood mixed with dust was smeared on the clothes that he had stolen from somewhere. He looked extremely tired and could even collapse at any time. It was such a seriously injured man who followed the Tang Empire cavalry from the depths of the wilderness to the outside of Tuyang City and did not collapse. The Tang Empire cavalry looked at the man in the distance with numb expressions and even some reverence in their eyes. In the past few days, the man had been following the Tang Empire cavalry, ready to rush into the camp and assassinate General Xiahou. He had tried 17 times and failed 17 times, but he still persisted. It was not that the Tang Empire cavalry did not want to kill the man, but the man proved with his strength and perseverance that he was difficult to kill, especially when the Tang Empire soldiers did not want to pay the price of mutual destruction. Ambushes and counter-ambushes, ambushes and encirclement happened continuously in this long journey and then ended in silence. The man could not kill General Xiahou. Xiahou and his invincible cavalry could not kill the man either. It had happened too many times. All the Tang Empire cavalry, even the proudest generals, were a little numb when faced with the powerful man who was like a beggar. The sound of hooves rang out, and the vigilant cavalry parted to form a path. Xiahou galloped over and looked at Tang on the meadow in the distance without any emotion on his face. In the past few days, the Tang Empire cavalry had tried everything to lure and kill the powerhouse from the Devil's Doctrine. They had almost succeeded several times, but in the end, the other party had escaped. Tang also had a few opportunities to successfully get close to Xiahou and force Xiahou to start a fierce battle with him. Xiahou was not fighting alone. He had countless cavalrymen as guards. So, in this continuous battle, Tang was ultimately at an absolute disadvantage. Now Tang was seriously injured and did not have the demeanor of a powerhouse from the Devil's Doctrine. He was more like a poor beggar. However, Tang was not dead, and Tang still insisted on killing him. Xiahou was also seriously injured. The armor made by the Academy on his body was finally destroyed by Tang's demonic blood-red broadsword the day before yesterday. Behind me is Tuyang City. Xiahou looked at Tang on a meadow in the distance and said indifferently, "You have no chance." Tang said, "I have said that you are old." Xiahou said, "I have also said that old and frail means nothing to you and me." Tang said, "The problem is that your heart is old. From the moment you decided to retire, you are really old. Old is weak. If Tuyang City was 100 miles away, you would definitely die in my hands." Xiahou was silent and found that what Tang said was right. "But I have Sun Zoil City, and I have countless cavalrymen who are loyal to me." Xiahou said, "And you are only one person." Tang said, "If you could understand that fighting is ultimately a personal matter, maybe you would not have made so many mistakes and would not be as old as you are now." In midsummer, the grass was long and the eagles were flying. There were countless wounds on Tang's body. Blood was still dripping, falling on the grass and starting to burn. Xiahou covered his mouth with his fist and began to cough. There was blood flowing from his fingers, like an injured eagle on the rock wall. Eagles were generally called eagles. However, eagles could grow old, but humans could not. And to be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 441. 1,000 years ago, the desolate man was the master of the northern prairie of the mainland. So even today, the prairie was still called the wilderness. There were eagles on the prairie, so the desolate man was good at breeding eagles. Even though they were defeated by the Tang Empire and were forced to move north to the cold region in the far north, the desolate man still did not give up breeding eagles. Xiaohou was a desolate man. So was Tang, so they were familiar with breeding eagles. Looking at Tang, who was dressed in rags and dirty like a beggar, on the meadow by the mountain forest in the distance, Xiaohou suddenly remembered his experience of training an eagle when he was a child. He remembered the scene of the young and tender eagle teetering on the iron frame, but refusing to lower its head stubbornly. From the depths of the wilderness to the south, he had been fighting for thousands of miles. He had always been very confident, thinking that he was torturing Tang like an eagle. He used Tang's anger and hatred to make Tang unable to close his eyes and use all of his energy to fight day after day. Xiaohou had thought that he was about to succeed. He saw with his own eyes that Tang's genuine qi was draining and his energy was getting tired. His rock-hard body became ordinary and could be injured. He thought that Tang's blood would be drained during the long journey and he would finally fall down like the young eagle. However, he did not expect that Tang did not fall down. Instead, he felt an unprecedented fatigue, weakness, and even a trace of tiredness in the deepest part of his body. Could it be that he was the eagle that was being tormented? Xiaohou kept coughing and blood kept spilling from his fist that was stuck to his lips. But his expression was still indifferent and calm, and his deep-set eyes were as cold as ice. Being old was not scary. No matter on the prairie or on the cliff by the hot sea, only an old eagle was a real eagle. He put down his fist and took out a handkerchief to wipe the blood stains at the corner of his mouth. He looked at Tang in the distance expressionlessly and said, "Your perseverance surprised me, but it was just a surprise. After all, you're not your teacher. Before you cross that threshold, you will never be a threat to me." Tang looked down at the long grass at his feet that had been set on fire by his blood. The continuous battles had seriously injured him. The seemingly inconspicuous Tang cavalrymen, with their strong military discipline and tactical organization, had caused him a lot of trouble. As the genuine qi in his body was gradually exhausted, his seemingly indestructible body finally bled under those sabers and arrows. The devil's doctrine had withered. As a world wayfarer of the devil's doctrine, he was more like a loner. Not to mention, compared to the countless Taoist priests of the West Hill Divine Palace, even compared to the traitor Xiaohou, he seemed so weak. In a sense, the current devil's doctrine was him. He was the devil's sect. He was the last spirit and pride of the devil's sect, so he could not fall. Therefore, even though he was seriously injured and could not see any hope, he still silently fought with Xiaohou and the thousands of Tang cavalrymen until they reached Tuyang City. Tang raised his head and looked at Xiaohou, who was surrounded and protected by countless cavalrymen. He said, "Look at your body that seems strong, but is actually like rotten wood. Ask your heart that seems strong, but is actually like mud. If I really can't threaten you, why would you turn around and say these words to me at this time?" Xiaohou was silent for a long time, and then said, "You can't follow me back to Chang'an. The Central Plains is the human world shrouded by Hao Yin's divine light. Even heaven can't tolerate you. What can you do?" As the last and strongest survivor of the devil's doctrine, Tang could live freely in the wilderness and face Yisu. But he was very clear that if he really went to the Central Plains, he would inevitably face the endless pursuit of the powerhouses of the West Hill Divine Palace. In the end, he would die. "I really can't enter the Central Plains." Tang looked at Tuyang City not far away and said, "I don't even dare to enter that city. But I have already hurt you. I have made you weak and nervous, so I know you are destined to die." Xiaohou said, "Why do you say these meaningless words? I won't do meaningless things, and I won't say meaningless things. I am definitely not the only one in the world who wants to kill you. When you leave the military camp and return to Chang, or when you retire, the ghosts in the steamer and the little ghosts who died on the road will come to your back and demand your life. Those ghosts will thank me for chasing you all the way, and I will also thank them for chasing you to death. Tang finally nodded to Xiaohou and said, I wish you a happy retirement and a wonderful death. After saying this, he turned and left the meadow, disappearing into the forest. Xiaohou silently looked at the deserted meadow and the forest gently blown by the summer wind. Without saying anything more, he gently lifted the reins and rode toward Tuyang City. The wind blowing from the wilderness stirred the forest, the deep grass, the military flag on top of Tuyang City, and the white hair that peeked out from the edge of his helmet. Since ancient times, famous generals were like beauties. They were not allowed to see their white hair, but his hair had already turned white. The newly renovated house by Yanming Lake welcomed the first group of guests. Princess Liu, her stepson, and Situ Ilan. Ningke welcomed Situ Ilan's arrival very much. He had no problem with the poor savage prince, but he inevitably felt that the visit of Princess Liu was a little troublesome. He had a good relationship with Liu, but he was very clear that she would definitely bring him trouble. Sure enough, when only he and Liu were left in the quiet study, trouble came. Outside the carved window of the study, there were several old trees, shading the summer. The breeze was pleasant, and even the sound of cicadas in the forest was not annoying. Liu held a bowl of herbal tea and looked at the faintly visible lake view outside the window. She smiled and said, The cicadas make the forest quieter. This house is really good. No wonder a miser like you is willing to spend so much money. Ning Ke sighed and thought, Is this really the place to start talking? He walked to Li Yu's side and said, Thank you, Your Highness, for sending these big trees. The old trees in the house by Yanming Lake were all from Li Yu's royal fief. These trees were very valuable. The cost of transporting them out of the mountain and back to Chang, in city, was a terrifying figure. The most important thing was that there were many rare ancient trees that could not be bought even with money. Ning Ke was indeed a person of high status, but Li Yu was the dignified princess of the Tang Empire. She did not need to carefully please him, and such a heavy gift naturally had to be returned. After all, they're just wild things and not worth much. Li Yu walked to the display shelf in the study and looked at the antiques on the shelf. Her expression changed slightly, and she said with a chuckle, When I was a child, I asked my father for this brush washer, but he said he gave it to her, so it was not good to get it back. I did not expect to see in your study today. Ningke looked at the stone brush washer and said, If you like it, you can take it. Li Yu said with slight mockery, Why should I take what she gave you? In Chang, and city, only Li Yu and her brother dared to call the empress her. Of course, this could only be a private address. Obviously, Li Yu did not care about letting Ning Ke see her true attitude towards the empress. Ning Ke did not reply. Li Yu looked at him and said with a smile, I heard that you have been to the palace often recently. You must be very familiar with her? Ning Ke said, Indeed, I am much more familiar with her than before. Li Yu asked, What kind of person do you think she is? Ning Ke answered directly, I don't know. After a moment of silence, Li Yu said with a self-mocking smile, I have been opposing her for so many years, but I have never been able to see what she is thinking, let alone you. Ning Ke shook his head and said, Why think so much? Li Yu took a sip of the herbal tea in the cup and frowned slightly. Then she smiled and said, It's delicious. Is this the mulberry tea made by Sang Sang? I have heard her mention it several times, but this is the first time I have tasted it. Listening to Her Highness talking about family matters, Ning Ke suddenly felt much more relaxed. He was prepared to explain how to make mulberry tea and emphasize that it was his own invention. However, he did not expect that Li Yu's next sentence would come so quickly. The atmosphere took a sudden turn for the worse. My thoughts are very simple, you know. Li Yu looked into Ning Ke's eyes calmly and persistently. Ning Ke did not avoid her gaze and said, I have also told you my thoughts. Li Yu said, I know that you have some problems with the imperial military. Ning Ke said, I admit it, but the problems can always be solved, and I don't need to care about them. I don't think that after you killed Huang Xing and Yushueju, you can still have a good talk with Xiaohou and let those old generals in the military think that you are kind and harmless. Li Yu said, These problems cannot be solved. Maybe you really don't need to care about them, but if you want to continue doing something, you have to care about them. Ning Ke said, "Of course I will not admit what Her Highness said. As for the little friction between me and General Xiaoho, I believe it will not last for too long. Everyone knows that Xiaoho is on the Empress's side." Liu said, "The Empress is trying to win you over because she does not want the dispute between Xiaoho and the Academy to continue to expand. But are you willing?" Ning Ke thought to himself, "I also know that the Empress is Xiaoho's sister. Eldest brother had already told him, so he would not reveal this big secret in front of Liu." Liu said, "If the hatred between you and Xiaoho is only the conflict in the wilderness, since Mr. First has already set the tone, I hope you are willing." Ning Ke frowned slightly and did not understand why she would choose to stand on the same side as the Empress. Liu said in a low voice, "Only some young generals in the army are willing to be loyal to me. Hua Shangyue leads the Hebei Prefecture Army, and it is too difficult for him to accumulate military merits. With his current qualifications, it is impossible for him to take over Xiaoho's position in the Northeast Border Military. But since Xiaoho is willing to retire, it is a good thing for me. So I do not want other things to interfere with this process." This explanation was very naked and sincere. Even Ning Ke could not help but be slightly stunned. After a moment, he sighed and said, "This kind of thing is really boring." Liu said with slight mockery, "You are indeed a student of the headmaster of the academy. You even feel that the throne of the Tang Empire is boring." Ning Ke said, "I have told you before, don't pay too much attention to the attitude of the person who entered the human realm from the academy. I have teachers, senior brothers and sisters, His Majesty in the palace, the Nation Master in the temple, Huang Yang in the temple, and Su Shi and the other old generals in the army. Whether the throne should be passed to your brother or the prince born by the Empress is ultimately these people's opinion." Liu looked at him quietly and suddenly said, "But have you ever thought that whether it is father, the headmaster of the academy, or the old generals in the army, they will all leave one day? Why does the academy want you to enter the human realm? Why does father think so highly of you? Why is Su Shi so vigilant against you? Actually, it is all because of the same reason. No one can resist the fate of Haotian. As time passes, the Tang Empire will eventually lose them. Some people are worried that you will become an evil eagle without the suppression of the hunter and harm the world after they pass away. But the headmaster of the academy and father are silent. They want to protect you, torture you, and polish you. They want you to turn from a young eagle into an eagle and protect the Tang Empire without them. After struggling and thinking, there is still one more chapter. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 442. He left the city of Wei, came to Chang, and entered the academy, and finally entered the back mountain. But before he could learn anything, Ning Ke had to take the student from the front yard to the frontier fortress in the north of Yin Kingdom. Now that he thought about it, this must be the result of the discussion between the emperor and the academy. When he came to the wilderness, he received the news from the Imperial Center Administration that the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine deep in the wilderness was opened and the tomes of arcane appeared. Ning Ke had to go north. After so many tests and even tortures, he finally inherited the mantle of youngest uncle, which was the embodiment of the will of the headmaster of academy. His Majesty and Master Yensei did not hesitate to hand over the big tactical array of Chang into him. These things all prove the trust and expectation of the imperial court and the academy in him. Ning Ke was very clear about this, so he was not surprised when he heard what Liu said. But he had never thought about it carefully, because as indifferent and ruthless as he was, he still felt that those deaths were sad things. "I don't think that will happen in a short period of time," Ning Ke said. Liu said bitterly, "Maybe what I said is not pleasant to hear. Sometimes when I think about the future, I feel nervous and sad. But people will grow old and die. My father is in the prime of his life, but his health is not as good as it looks. Before I married the Golden Tent, I asked the Imperial Academy of Medicine about my father. My father was seriously injured years ago, and his condition has been worsening ever since. The medicine can't do anything about it, so he often coughs." Ning Ke thought of the scene when he was with His Majesty in the Imperial study. He thought of those inexplicably happy curses of idiots and the occasional coughs. He was silent. Although Su Shi is a powerhouse at the peak state of martial arts, he is already very old, and the whole world knows that he has an old lung disease. No matter how he nourishes himself, it can't be cured. The headmaster of Academy is the most stable and powerful mountain in the Tang Empire. It seems that he will stay green forever, but he has lived for more than 100 years. Can he live forever? Liu looked at Ning Ke and said calmly, "Life, old age, sickness, and death are irreversible. The headmaster of Academy and my father are thinking about the future. Why do we have not to think about it?" Ning Ke took the cold mulberry tea from her hand and walked back to the desk. He put his hands on the edge of the desk and thought for a moment. He said, "At least there are many years." Liu frowned slightly. Ning Ke said, "The headmaster and his majesty can live for at least another 10 or 20 years. At that time, I will be much stronger than I am now. Perhaps eldest brother or second brother can take the position after the headmaster leaves. I think the Tang Empire will be as strong as it is now. So I don't think there is anything to think about now." Liu said, "I have told you before that my request to you is very simple. When the succession of the Tang Empire requires the Academy's help, please stand by my side." Ning Ke did not turn around. He looked up at the ancient trees outside the window and the Yinming Lake in the distance. He thought about how the lake looked like in winter, Xiaohou, and the inseparable blood relationship between Xiaohou and the Empress. He said, "If that day comes, I will not stand on the Empress' side." Liu was somewhat satisfied with his answer, but she still regretted that he did not directly express his attitude. Looking at his back, a faint look of disappointment appeared on her beautiful face. She sighed softly and said, "If I had known that things would develop like this, I would not have let you go." Ning Ke turned around and said, "At that time, you and I were from different worlds, and I was not a person who was willing to be caught. So don't feel regretful." Liu walked slowly to him and looked into his eyes as if she wanted to see something. "If I didn't catch you, I could stay with you. I've been thinking if I did not stand up beside the bonfire, would we have stayed in the same world?" Ning Ke recalled the bonfire at the entrance of Northern Mountain Road, the maidservants and fairy tales beside the bonfire, as well as those conversations. He curled his lips and said, "The key is that the price you gave me was too low." Hearing his words, Liu clearly sensed that he was a little emotional and evasive, a little regretful, and a little secretly happy. She smiled and said, "If I had known that your little handmaiden would become the great divine priest of light of the West Hill Divine Palace, I would definitely have offered the highest price." Ning Ke smiled and asked, "What's the highest price?" In the eyes of women in the world, Ning Ke's appearance was considered fresh, but not handsome. He was extremely cute when he smiled, especially with his freckles and dimples. The girls in the House of Red Sleeves were fascinated by the young man's dimples, freckles, and freshness. At this time, his smile was reflected in the depths of Liu's eyes. She subconsciously raised her hand and touched the dimples on his face. She said, "Your freckles are getting lighter." Ning Ke felt the smooth fingertips on his face and was slightly absent-minded. He said, "Sang Sang often used a lot of powder in Chinjinji Cosmetic Store, so she would give some to me. Is that the reason?" Liu suddenly came to her senses and quickly withdrew her hand. "I suffered a loss." Ning Ke looked at her and said seriously. Liu's cheeks were slightly red, but there was no shyness in her bright eyes. She slightly raised her head and joked, "If you are not afraid of Song Song's jealousy, you can touch it back." Ning Ke coughed and with great difficulty suppressed the urge to reach out and touch her smooth and slightly pointed chin. He put his hands behind his back and asked, "Speaking of which, where is Sang Sang? She must be telling stories to Xiaoman." Liu rolled her eyes and said, "I won't tease you anymore. I'm going to find her." Ning Ke and Sidu Alan walked along Yinming Lake and chatted casually in the cool lake breeze. They only had to be careful to brush away the irritating willow branches that came at their faces from time to time. Sidu Alan was a little disappointed because she did not participate in the spring war in the wilderness. But this disappointment was a little absurd in Ning Ke's eyes. "I don't know what you were thinking. What's the point of fighting? You read books in the academy every day and learn needlework in the mansion every day. Don't you feel bored? I am a man, not a girl. If I were you, I would definitely not feel bored. That's not what you said when we were in the Blue Water Battalion. The two walked on the Bluestone Path. It was just like last year when they walked on the White Pebble Beach by the Blue Sea at the Frontier Fortress. The calm and pure atmosphere surrounded the young man and woman. Stay away from her, Ning Ke suddenly said. Sidhu Ilan looked up at him and knew that he was referring to the princess. She was puzzled and said, I don't understand what you mean. What do you want to say? There were willow branches hanging down from the lake bank and brushing his cheeks. Ning Ke was a little annoyed and reached out to pick one. He said, You were young and could ride with her on the long street and be proud. But if you really want to be a female general of the Tang Empire, you have to understand that it's different from a female army. Sidhu Ilan thought quietly for a long time and looked up at him. She said, I want to be a female general of the Tang Empire, not someone else's. Ning Ke saw that she understood what he meant and nodded with appreciation. He handed over the grasshopper woven from willow branches and said, This is your reward. Sidhu Ilan took the lovely grasshopper and was very happy. She said, You are really fast. Ning Ke picked up another willow branch and said, When Sang Sang was young and often cried because of hunger, I would find some leaves and weave some gadgets to make her happy. It's faster to make more gadgets. Sidhu Ilan looked at his expression and said jokingly, Look at the lake, and you will find how annoying you are at this time. Ning Ke said proudly, I am good at it. Why shouldn't I be proud? Sidhu Ilan blinked and asked, Are you proud because of your dexterity or because you made Sang Sang happy? Ning Ke said, Both, but the latter is more. Sidhu Ilan gently coughed and asked with a smile, During those days, people in Chang and city had been talking about you and the calligraphy addict. Many people, including Wu Tsai, had seen you holding hands with the calligraphy addict. Why did you get together with your little handmaiden a few days later? It was already surprising that Sang Sang suddenly became the miss of the Grand Secretary's mansion. This change is even more surprising. Ning Ke was stunned and asked, Can I? Sidhu Ilan raised the willow branch grasshopper in front of her eyes and looked very naughty. She said, Why not? It's just that many people said you played with the calligraphy addict's feelings. They are very ashamed of you. Ning Ke waved his arms and said angrily, How did I play with her? How did I play with her? I have become like this. What else do you want me to do? Besides, when did I hold hands with her? He stretched out his arms in the lake wind and protested indignantly. We did swim together, but where did my arms go? I didn't even touch her hands. The new house by the Yinming Lake was completed. Under Song Song's strong request, Ning Ke did not hire stewards or maids, nor did he waste money on any opening ceremony. But since Liu brought Ilan here, Ning Ke thought that he had to put on a show. So he returned to the back of the mountain of the academy and invited his senior brothers and sisters to be guests. Just as he had expected, his senior brothers and sisters in the back of the mountain of the academy were not interested in this kind of thing at all. He felt a little relaxed, but also a little embarrassed. Unexpectedly, the next day, Chun Pippi came with Tang shouting. Ning Ke rowed and rowed the boat. Looking at the fat man lying on the bow, sighing and urging, he felt angry. He thought that it was Sang Sang who rowed on the lake, and he enjoyed it. But after he came, he had to serve him. What kind of logic was this? Although he thought so, he could not say it out, because the academy was most particular about, to be exact, second brother was most particular about brotherhood. Since Chun Pippi was the senior brother, he could naturally ask Ning Ke to do things. Even if Ning Ke had any opinions about it, he did not have the guts to reason with second brother. I say, can't you hurry up? Didn't you eat today? Chun Pippi looked at the boat that was about to disappear into the lotus field and saw Tang Xiaodong's figure on the boat. He was so anxious that he almost jumped and scolded Ning Ke through the oar and said angrily, You ate all the lunch. Where can I go to eat? See you tomorrow. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 443. For people in two boats floating on the lake. It was a beautiful thing. Unfortunately, Tang Xiaodang and Sang Sang were in the same boat, so Chen Pippi had to take the same ticket as Ning Quebec. The boat was faintly discernible in the lotus field. Tang Xiaodang and Sang Sang were happily talking about something with some small things in their hands. Chen Pippi looked ahead and thought that it was such a pity that he couldn't get close to Xiaodang after he saved her from the clutches of his third senior sister. What are they talking about? Chen Pippi asked. Ning Ke said, a few days ago I made some small things with willow branches for Sang Sang. I haven't made them for many years, but she still likes them very much. She must show them to her friends. Chen Pippi was slightly startled. He looked back at Ning Ke beside the oar and said, I didn't know that you were a guy who knows how to please girls. Ning Ke sneered. Do you think everyone is worse than a beast like you? It's been so many days. Haven't you got the girl yet? Chen Pippi lowered his head in shame and rubbed his hands nervously. He said, don't talk nonsense. Ning Ke shook his head helplessly and said, I can't tell that you are so thin-skinned just by looking at your fat face. Chen Pippi refuted with a lack of confidence. That's because the girl is thin-skinned. The boat sailed into the depths of the lotus field. The traces left by the iron kettle by the thunder and lightning had long disappeared. The green branches and round leaves covered the sky, which was very quiet. Sang Sang and Tang Xiaotang's boat rowed to an unknown place. Ning Ke put down the oar and walked into the canopy. He handed a pot of wine to Chen Pippi and whispered, Have you thought it through? Chen Pippi took the wine pot and carefully took a sip. Then he frowned because of the spiciness. After a long silence, he said, How can I think about this kind of thing? But you should know who you are. Ning Ke said calmly, Although you still refuse to tell me, and I still don't know whether you are the son of the hierarch lord or the abbey dean, you are the pride and future of Haotian Taoism. Although the headmaster has raised you for so many years, you will eventually go back. Chen Pippi looked at the lotus field outside the boat and said blankly, Probably. Ning Ke said, Tang Xiaodang is from the devil's doctrine. Chen Pippi said in a low voice, Then what do you think we should do? Do your own things and think for yourself. Ning Ke said, I'm just reminding you that if you really want to return to Haotian Taoism, neither the West Hill Divine Palace nor the Jishou Abbey will allow you to marry Tang Xiaodang. Chen Pippi looked up at him and asked, Why did you choose Sang Sang instead of the calligraphy addict? That is a different kind of pain from what you are facing now. Ning Ke said bluntly, No matter what I choose, I will at most be laughed at and despised by others, or hurt the girl. But if you make the wrong choice, or if your determination is not strong enough, you will definitely face more than these, and Tang Xiaodang will be even more miserable. Chen Pippi frowned again. His round face, which was usually carefree and cheerful, showed a rare, solemn expression, which eventually turned into endless sorrow. It's going to rain. He frowned and drank all the liquor in the pot, as if he was drinking poison. He said with a lisp, I'll take her back to the academy first. Ning Ke stuck his head out of the canopy and saw the clear blue sky above the lotus field. There were no clouds in the sky, and it did not look like it was going to rain. Chen Pippi stroked his chest and said faintly, It's raining here. It's all your fault. It's rare for you to come out and play, but you have to mention these things that make people feel bad. The sky was clear, and there was no rain. Chen Pippi, a fat young man who had always been optimistic, felt a cold rain falling in his heart. Gradually, his heart felt like it was going to be moldy. Ning Ke sympathized with his senior brother very much. After sending him and Tang Xiaodang off, he sat by the window of the study and could not help but feel sad when he thought of what Chen Pippi had said on the boat. At this moment, a wind blew from the south bank of Yanming Lake, rustling the lotus leaves in the lake and ruffling the long willows on the lake bank. The wind went around the thick trunk of the ancient tree and poured into the study. Sang Sang sat in the chair, holding a cup of herbal tea in her hand. She squinted at the lake wind that came from outside the window and said, It looks like it's really going to rain. As soon as the little handmaiden finished her words, the sound of rain suddenly sounded. The pitter-patter of rain fell from the sky, slowly and firmly washing away the summer heat in the woods of the house. It did not take long for the courtyard to be completely wet. I didn't expect it to really rain. Ninkei took the cup of tea from her hand and drank it, moistening his throat that was a little dry because of worrying about his friend. Then he looked at the empty cup and asked, "What did Tang Xiaodang say?" Sang Sang hugged her thin legs and put her chin on her knees. She seriously recalled the conversation on the boat in the depths of the lotus field and said, Tang Tang said that she was a little muddle-headed. Ninkei was slightly stunned and asked, "That's it?" Sang Sang said, "She said that she had to ask her brother's opinion on this matter." Ninkei thought of the powerhouse from the Devil's Doctrine who wore a leather coat and was as terrifying as a rock. He suddenly felt that the lake wind outside the window was a little cold and suddenly felt more sympathy for Chen Pippi. The rain in the courtyard became heavier and heavier, and the summer heat was quickly washed away. The rainwater on the lawn also accumulated more and more, converging into several thin streams that flowed towards Yiming Lake. Thousands of rivers flow into the sea. It's natural, Ninkei said with emotion. Sang Sang raised her head and gave him a puzzled look, not understanding what he was talking about. What I want to say is that there are some things that we can only passively worry about, but we can't do anything about it. We can only silently watch it develop, and at most give our blessings. Ninkei looked at the heavy rain outside the window and said, "It's like the sky is going to rain and the young lady is going to get married." Sang Sang thought about it and hugged her legs tighter. There was silence in the courtyard. There was no sound, only the sound of rain. At this moment, there was a sudden loud knock on the front door of the house. "I told you to say it's going to rain, and now it's really going to rain. Did you not bring an umbrella? This is a guest from Hao Ian. You two can sleep here tonight, but don't expect me to lend you an umbrella. Sang Sang and I have set a strict rule since we were young. We can borrow people and lives, but we can't borrow two things. You can't borrow money, and you can't borrow an umbrella." The knocking in the front yard became louder and more urgent. It was obvious that the guy was not happy with the heavy rain, and he wanted to express his strong dissatisfaction by knocking. Ninkei was too lazy to care. He still imitated the eldest brother and walked slowly to the door and kept nagging to make fun of the guy. "You want to say why you can't borrow an umbrella? Hey, this is a very long story, and I don't know if you're interested to hear it. You shouldn't have left just now. Oh my God, why is it you?" Ninkei's voice stopped abruptly when he pushed open the courtyard door. He looked outside with his mouth open, and his hands were still holding the heavy courtyard door. He was so stiff that he looked like he had been struck by lightning. He really felt like he had been struck by lightning at this time. It was not Chen Pippi and Tang shouting outside the house. It was a young Taoist girl in a blue Taoist robe. The young Taoist girl was soaked by the heavy rain. Her wide blue Taoist robe was wet, and her messy and sticky hair was on her forehead. She looked very embarrassed. She was holding a horsetail whisk in her hand, and the tail of the whisk was on her left arm, dripping water. No matter how one looked at it, being drenched was a very embarrassing scene. Therefore, the girl's eyes were no longer as cold and proud as before, but with a bit of anger and shame. But in fact, she did not look embarrassed at all. Her eyebrows were still so beautiful. No matter how the rain fell on her pale cheeks, no matter how angry her eyes were, she was still beautiful, because she was recognized as one of the 3 most beautiful girls in the world. Ninkei pushed open the courtyard door and saw a beautiful girl in the heavy rain. Her cheeks were pale, and her hair was slightly messy. She looked timid and pitiful. Ninkei suddenly thought of many beautiful stories and strange stories, and then remembered a song that kept repeating, "You are so beautiful." Ninkei believed that the beautiful Taoist girl outside the door was definitely more powerful than those vixens in strange stories. He also believed that she was more beautiful than those vixens. But he was not tempted, because he did not want to court death. He did not even want to see her at all. Even though his cultivation state was much stronger now, he still did not want to see her. Therefore, his first reaction was to close the door. However, just as he was about to close the 2 heavy courtyard doors with all his strength, he found that the doors were many times heavier than before, because the Taoist girl in the rain stretched out a palm and placed it in the gap of the door. Ninkei did not dare to think about how much blood he would lose under her Taoist sword if he clamped her hand and made it bleed. But he still did not stop closing the door. just as the two heavy courtyard doors were about to clamp the Taoist girl's palm. A faint light suddenly appeared on the tiny hand that was dripping with rainwater. There was a sudden gust of wind at the courtyard door, and the heavy rain falling on the courtyard from the air suddenly stopped. An indifferent and powerful aura gushed out from that palm, instantly evaporating the rainwater and an extremely small green leaf on the surface of the palm. Then it shattered everything it touched. There was a dull and loud sound at the courtyard door. The people in the distant Chang and city who were sheltering from the rain under the eaves looked curiously at the Yanming Lake where the sound came from. They wondered if the loud thunder had killed anyone. No one died, but the two doors were destroyed. Ninkei looked at the big gap in the courtyard door and wanted to cry, but had no tears. The splinters of the courtyard door splashed all over his body, and even his face was covered with splinters. He looked very pitiful under the washing of the rain. Looking at the fresh, fragrant wood stubble gradually turning from white to gray in the rain, he thought of the money he had spent on the two courtyard doors. His expression became extremely painful. He looked up at the beautiful Taoist girl in the rain and trembled with heartache. He shouted angrily, "Yi Hongyu, you must pay for my door." Consecutive two-word chapter names. That's the end of it. Today's chapter names made me exhale deeply and feel extremely good. Today is Friday. I will accompany my parents to drink and play, so there is only one chapter left. I will write some more. There will be updates tomorrow and Saturday, because I asked for leave a few days ago. I will make up for it tomorrow. Have a good weekend. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 444. The young Taoist priest in the rain was naturally Yi Hongyu. That night, after cutting open Shinbachi's eyes with a piece of thin paper, she left the Peach Mountain in indigo clothes and left the West Hill under the cover of the night. After a long journey to Chang and a heavy rain, she became even more exhausted and haggard. When she heard Ninkei's question, she could not help but say angrily, "What can I do if I don't compensate you?" Looking at the indifference and anger in her eyes, Ninkei did not dare to do anything to her. After all, this beautiful female Taoist priest in front of him was the person he feared the most in the cultivation world. He brushed off the sawdust on his face and said in a distressed tone, "If you don't want to pay, then don't. Why are you so serious?" Yi Hongyu pulled him away from the door and barged into the courtyard. She said, "Find me a room. I want to stay." Ninkei looked at the young Taoist priest walking into the deep courtyard and was stunned for a while before he finally came to his senses. He hurried to catch up with her and asked with a bitter face, "Why did you come to Chang'an? Why did you come to Chang'an? How did you know I lived here? Are you looking for a place to stay? How long do you plan to stay?" In the corridor, Yi Hongyu suddenly stopped and said, "I need some time to think about some questions." Ninkei asked, "What? How long do you need to think?" Yi Hongyu reached out to pull the hair that was dripping from her forehead and said, "It shouldn't be too short." Ninkei looked at the beautiful girl in front of him and said nervously, "You are the West Hill Tao addict. There are many people in the world who want to flatter you. You can think of anywhere in the world. I guess you know the way to the Revelation Institute, the Lank Temple, and the Jisho Abbey. Why do you have to come to Chang'an? Do you really have to do it in my house?" Yi Hongyu said, "Because Chang and is the only place in the world that the Divine Hall cannot enter." Ninkei gasped. He looked at her and asked in a trembling voice, "You betrayed us too?" Yi Hongyu frowned slightly and said, "Why did you use the word also?" Ninkei said, "The great divine priest of light also lived in Chang and for half a year last year." Yi Hongyu was silent and did not answer him. She turned and continued to walk to the end of the corridor. Her steps were steady and calm, leaving a trail of water in the corridor. Ninkei quickly followed her and shouted angrily, "Even if you didn't betray us, you must have offended some bigwigs in the Divine Hall. Then why should I offend those bigwigs in the Divine Hall? Even you have offended them and had to run away from home to avoid trouble." Yi Hongyu continued to walk along the winding corridor in the courtyard. She looked at the forest outside the corridor in the rain and said calmly, "I said in the wilderness that I would kill you." Yi Hongyu said, The arrow you shot at Long Qing on the snow cliff will be canceled. What do you think? Yi Hongyu said, yes, you can celebrate. Now that I've said that I won't try to kill you, you can start celebrating. The premise of this sentence is that she can kill you if she says she wants to. It was a simple sentence, but it contained a lot of pride, confidence, and even narcissism. Ning Ke was also a narcissistic person, but he had to put away all his narcissism when he was with the Tao addict because he knew how terrible she was. At this time, hearing that she didn't try to kill him, although he was happy, he also felt a little humiliated. Suddenly, he raised his eyebrows and asked tentatively, "Are you hurt?" Yi Hongyu did not hide it from him and said directly, "I haven't recovered from my injuries in the wilderness." The seemingly silent but extremely dangerous battle with Master Lotus at the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine would often appear in Ning Ke's mind. He was very clear about how important the Tao addict was in that battle and how serious her injuries were. However, he did not expect it to last until now. No wonder I feel that your state of cultivation seems to be much weaker. When I opened the courtyard door just now, I saw you drenched like a stray puppy in the rain. It was very pitiful. I was wondering why I felt that you were pitiful. Ning Ke looked at the girl's pale cheeks and thought of the past when they fought side by side in the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine. He felt a little emotional, but after a moment, he forced himself to calm down and said in a low voice, "But since you are so weak now, I don't think I have enough bargaining chips. What's in it for me to take you in?" They had reached the end of the 9-turn corridor. If they went further, they would be in the flower hall and the study. Yi Hongyu stopped and turned to look at Ning Quebec. She said calmly, "If you think that my conditions are not enough, why don't we fight again?" Ning Ke looked at her eyes that were like autumn water for a long time. He wanted to see a trace of uncertainty in the depths of her eyes, but he did not see it. If he could see a trace of uncertainty in the Tao addict's eyes, he would attack without any scruples, hesitation, or pity, just like when he shot Long Qing by the Daming Lake. Because he was a cold-blooded and heartless person. He knew very well that the Tao addict was a rare person in the cultivation world who was as cold-blooded and heartless as himself. If there was a chance, no one would be willing to let the other go. Regrettably, Ning Ke saw tiredness, haggard, and even lost and perplexed in the girl's eyes, but he did not see her uncertainty about him. So Ning Ke shook his head and said with a smile, "You must be joking." Yi Hongyu looked into his eyes and said seriously, "You know I'm not joking." Ning Ke was sure that Yi Hongyu's cultivation had been greatly damaged after she had forcefully lowered her state at the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine. He had reached the upper state of the see-through state after he had cultivated in seclusion in the cliff cave. In terms of cultivation, he was already above Yi Hongyu, but he was still not sure that he could defeat her. He did not know the tragic experience of Chun Bachi, the commander of the upper state of the see-through state. He was just like the beasts in Min Mountain who felt the danger. So he continued to smile and shake his head. Then, like a very enthusiastic host, he stretched out his arm and led Yi Hongyu out of the corridor and into the main hall. Sang Sang stood at the threshold and watched him walk in with a drenched Taoist girl. Her face was full of curiosity, and she asked, "Do you want to boil the bathwater? Don't panic. Let me introduce you to the guest first." Ning Ke coughed twice and calmed himself down. He pointed at Yi Hongyu and said, "Don't be fooled by her messy appearance. In fact, she's a very great person. She is the powerful Tao addict who kills without blinking an eye that I often mention to you." Yi Hongyu said, "You still mention me often after returning to Chang'an?" Ning Ke answered honestly, "If I want to kill you, I will naturally talk about you often." Yi Hongyu nodded and said, "That makes sense." Ning Ke looked at the vigilant expression on Song Song's face and said with a smile, "She is indeed very scary. But only I need to be afraid. You don't have to be afraid because she is your senior sister." Then he walked to Song Song's side and put his arm around her shoulder. He said to Yi Hongyu, "My Sang Sang." Yi Hongyu felt that this petite handmaiden did not match the image of Sang Sang that she had imagined, but she did not show any expression of surprise. She calmed herself down and gently shook her horsetail whisk to greet junior sister Sang Sang. At this time, she was still wet. Rainwater dripped down her temples and horsetail whisk. The drenched Taoist robe clung to her curvy body, exuding a charming and seductive aura. But her expression was so calm and composed, like a dignified Taoist. Sang Sang was a little flustered. She half squatted down and slightly bowed to return the greeting. Then she stood up and looked at Yi Hongyu's beautiful face and seductive curves under the wet clothes. She could not help but sigh softly, full of envy and yearning. Ninkei was much calmer than before. He finally noticed that the Tao addict's green Taoist robe clung to her body. His eyes became brighter and full of envy. Yi Hongyu looked at them expressionlessly and asked, "Do I look good?" The master and the handmaiden nodded and praised. "Yes, you look good." Hearing this answer and looking at the two's confident expressions, Yi Hongyu could no longer maintain her cold expression like that of a glacier goddess. She took a deep breath and said, "I will go take a shower first, and then I will let you look to your heart's content." In the night, the pitter-patter of rain came from outside the window. Ninkei opened his eyes and looked at the carved ceiling on the bed. He had no intention of falling asleep. He said, "If she really wants to stay here, it will be very troublesome." Sang Sang slept on the other side of the bed. When she heard this, she lifted the thin veil and leaned against the headboard. She said very seriously, "Yes, it seems that we really need to hire a maid." Ning King naturally would not allow Sang Sang to serve others. He said, "We definitely need to hire a maid, but it is not troublesome. The trouble I'm talking about is more troublesome." Sang Sang asked curiously, "What kind of trouble is that?" Ning Kei thought of the murderous figure in red that flitted across the forest under the snow cliff in the depths of the wilderness. He thought of the divine light above the Daming Lake and the bloody mess in the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine. He felt a strong chill even on this rainy summer night. His body suddenly became colder and colder. He had encountered many dangers in his life. After returning to Chong, and from the city of Wei and entering the world of cultivators, he had also encountered many dangers. But the one who really made him feel the shadow of death was the Tao addict, Yi Hongyu. In the cultivation world, he had seen many powerhouses with profound states. Yi Hongyu was definitely not the strongest among them, but she gave him the feeling that she was the most dangerous. Because Yi Hongyu had a firm Taoist heart and was as ruthless as him, she really understood what it meant to fight and understand life and death. What happened in the West Hill Divine Palace that made Yi Hongyu flee in the night and resolutely seek refuge in Chong? And despite the hostility between the West Hill and the Tang Empire, there were not many bigwigs in the Divine Hall who could make the Tao addict so embarrassed. Was it the great divine priest of judgment or the hierarch lord? Ning Kei was very clear that if this matter was not handled well, it would really be a big trouble. Sang Sang said worriedly, "Then how can we solve this trouble? If Yi Hongyu can't solve the trouble, I naturally can't solve it either. But fortunately, I know many people who can solve the trouble of the West Hill Divine Palace." Ning Kei said, "I will hand this trouble over tomorrow." Nothing happened that night, but the two did not sleep well. Especially Ning Kei, thinking of such a dangerous person as Yi Hongyu sleeping in a guest room dozens of feet away. He felt nervous and uneasy. He did not fall asleep until the early hours of the morning. When he woke up, the summer rain had stopped and the sky was already bright. He hastily washed up and quietly left Yinming Lake with Sang Sang. They took a horse carriage to the academy. There will be more today, but the time is uncertain. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 445. Ever since he became a student of the second floor of the academy, Ning Kei rarely went to the front yard. That was because it was awkward to interact with his former classmates. However, he was in a hurry to report the situation and solve the problem. He also remembered that it was late and the students in the front yard were in class, so he did not go through the side door. Instead, he brought Sang Sang to the meadow, past the stone sign, and entered through the main door. The rain stopped, and the sun shone brightly. There was the sound of reading coming from one study room, and the sound of debate coming from another study room. The front yard of the academy was enveloped in a peaceful atmosphere. At this moment, an old voice came from classroom 3. The most basic and primitive is the most important. If you can't even understand a straight line, how can you understand the more difficult three-dimensional composition? What is a straight line? A straight line is an infinite straight line. Let me show you. After a while, a female professor wearing a blue gown walked out of classroom 3 with a piece of chalk in her hand. She looked serious and seemed to be drawing a straight line in the air. There was no end to the straight line. The female professor kept drawing with the chalk in her hand. Her footsteps were slow, calm, and persistent. Soon, she left classroom 3 and walked towards the instructor's lounge at the back of the academy. Seeing this, Ning-Ke was dumbfounded. He patted Song-Song's shoulder and led her to the lounge behind the female professor, forgetting why he had come to the academy. In order to visit Prince Longqing and Chong, and Chao Ji-Feng, the associate professor of etiquette, used the excuse that the qi of heaven and earth had changed and it was not suitable for classes. At that time, Ning-Ke felt that the instructors of the academy were extremely absurd. Today, this female professor who kept walking with a piece of chalk made him even more dumbfounded. Was it okay to be lazy like this? The female professor suddenly stopped outside the quiet and secluded bookstore. She put down her hand that had been stretched out in the air and carefully wrapped the chalk in a piece of paper. Then, she stuffed it into her sleeve. She looked at Ning-Ke and said, "You're here." Ning-Ke hurriedly bowed and said, "Greetings, Professor." The female professor tidied up her blue gown and said casually, "I-Ching is already blind. Just put him back." Ning-Ke knew that the female professor was related to the Sword Garret of South Jin Kingdom. Since Chao Xiaoshu was still alive and Lu I-Ching was blind, he had already paid the price. Under such circumstances, no matter how arrogant the academy was, there was no reason for them to continue imprisoning him. If they really wanted to put Lu Bai's brother under house arrest until he was old, did they really think that the Sage of Sword had no temper? The female professor looked at him and asked, "Is there a problem?" "No problem," Ning-Ke said respectfully. "I will go to the back of the mountain to ask the teacher." The female professor said, "The headmaster wants me to ask for your opinion. Do you have any questions?" Ning-Ke was stunned and said, "I have no problem." The female professor smiled, the wrinkles on her face like flowers, and said, "Is it all right?" Ning-Ke said seriously, "I will." They followed the stone path up the Cloud Gate array and entered the back of the mountain of the academy. They walked around the mirror lake and looked at the waterfall. Ning-Ke bowed and said, "Yi Hongyu has come to Chang'an." The only response he got was silence, as well as the wind blowing from the valley towards the thatched cottage. There was someone in the cottage, but no one was willing to talk to him. The headmaster of the academy sat in the cottage, motionless despite the wind blowing around him. His hair and beard fluttered in the wind, and he looked intoxicated, like an immortal. However, what was placed in front of him was not a zither, but a messy dining table. Eldest brother and second brother sat beside the headmaster of the academy. The news that the Tao addict had left the West Hill Divine Palace and come to Chang and did not surprise the 3 people in the cottage at all, let alone shock them. Ning-Ke thought in distress. It seems that this can really solve the problem. However, you think it is a small matter, but for me, it is a big headache. He coughed twice and said loudly again, "Ahem, she is living in my house now." Second brother looked at him coldly and said unhappily, "Can't you see that the teacher is doing something important?" Ning-Ke thought to himself, what important matter could there be in front of a table full of leftovers? It is nothing more than the headmaster of the academy bragging about his cooking skills, and you and eldest brother are flattering him. The headmaster of the academy waved to the outside of the cottage and said, "The strawberry smoothie is just about to melt. It is the most delicious time. You are lucky. Come in and have a bowl." Ning-Ke was not in the mood to eat the strawberry smoothie, so he helplessly took Sang-Sang into the cottage. Second brother looked at him and sighed in his heart. He walked to the table and moved the leftovers aside. Then he half knelt down and began to divide the strawberry smoothie in the big porcelain bowl into plates. The first plate was, of course, dedicated to the great teacher, the second to the great eldest brother, and the third to the great second brother. There was not much smoothie left in the big porcelain bowl. Ning Ke scooped it into a plate and was about to take it aside to eat. Unexpectedly, he heard the headmaster of the academy say, "Give it to the girl." Ning Ke was startled and handed the plate of smoothie to Sang Sang with a bitter face. Sang Sang smiled embarrassedly and then picked up the bamboo spoon. She scooped a spoonful of smoothie and put it into her mouth. After tasting it carefully for a moment, a happy smile appeared on her slightly tanned face. Ning Ke asked curiously, "Is it really that delicious?" Sang Sang held the plate in one hand and the spoon in the other. She nodded seriously. Ning Ke lowered his voice and said, "Feed me." Sang Sang looked at the headmaster of the academy and said with her head down, "This is for me." Ning Ke was annoyed and sneered, "Eat more if it's delicious." The headmaster of the academy was very happy to see Sang Sang eating happily. He waved his hand and said, "Eat less even if it's delicious. Girl, the coldness in your body has not been completely dispelled. It's not good to eat too much of these cold things." Sang Sang gently agreed and carefully picked out the strawberry pieces from a smoothie. The headmaster of the academy seemed to remember Ning Ke's existence at this time and asked, "What did you just say?" Ning Ke said respectfully, "The Tao addict came to Chong and is now my home. I don't know what happened in the West Hill Divine Palace that forced her to leave Peach Mountain." Second brother said indifferently, "Even the divine priest of light could leave West Hill. It's not hard to imagine that Yi Hong Yu was forced to leave West Hill." Ning Ke said, "But the West Hill will definitely know that she came to Chong, and what if they want her?" Second brother frowned slightly and said unhappily, "The West Hill once asked for your Sang Sang. Did you give her to you?" Ning Ke said, "That's different. Yi Hong Yu is not my family." At this moment, eldest brother said with a gentle smile, "Since the Tao addict is also in Chong, and why not let her become a disciple like Xiaodang?" The headmaster of the academy laughed and said, "I heard that the little girl is good. Ask her if she is willing to learn from me." Ning Ke was stunned. He did not expect that the headmaster would propose such an idea so casually. He thought of Chun Pippi's story and the time when Prince Longqing came to the second floor to take the exam as promised. He could not help but speculate that the teacher's greatest hobby in this life was to make all the genius disciples of Haotian Taoism his own students. What kind of hobby was that? Of course, Ning Ke did not want Yi Hong Yu to enter the academy, but since it was the headmaster's idea, he had no right to make any suggestions as a student. Suddenly, he thought of the headmaster of the academy talking about the cold air in Song Song's body. He suddenly realized that he had not been able to cure Song Song's old illness all these years, and had forgotten that there was such an immortal in the back of the mountain of the academy. "Headmaster, can Song Song's old illness be cured?" The headmaster of the academy looked at Sang Sang, who was concentrating on picking strawberries inside. He said, "The cold air in this girl's body is congenital and caused by the extremely cold rain. She has suffered a lot these years. Even the best doctor in the world can do nothing about it." Ning Ke thought that Song Song's illness had decreased a lot in the past 2 years. Wasn't it self-healing? He could not help but panic and said, "Headmaster, you can't just stand by and do nothing." The headmaster of the academy said, "I don't need to do anything about it." Ning Ke did not expect the headmaster of the academy to be so heartless. He suddenly became angry and said, "If you don't do anything, I will drop out of the school." In his anger, he was still rational. Ning Ke could not think of any way to force the headmaster of the academy, who was admired by the whole world, other than dropping out of the school. The headmaster of the academy was even angrier when he heard this. He scolded, "Stupid guy, don't say that you are my student in the future. Haotian's divine light is the brightest and warmest thing in the world. Since this girl has learned the divine skill from Wei Guangming, why would she need to worry about the cold air in her body? Why would she need me to do anything?" Ning Ke suddenly felt relaxed and a little angry. He said, "Then why don't you just say it? Why do you have to say so much nonsense to tease me? Teasing people will kill you." The headmaster of the academy was so angry that his beard flew in the air. He said, "How dare you refute me? I have lived dozens of years like you. Even if we don't care about seniority, Don't you know how to respect your elders? Second brother was a serious and polite person. His expression had long become extremely ugly when he saw the headmaster and his disciple verbally fighting each other. However, it was obvious that the headmaster enjoyed this kind of quarrel, so he could only keep his mouth shut and stare at Ning K coldly with a murderous look. Eldest brother could not stand it anymore. He shook his head helplessly and interrupted the topic. He looked at Ning K and said, "Youngest brother, I heard that you bought a big house in Chong and—" "Yes," Ning K replied. Eldest brother did not say anything more. He lowered his head to eat the strawberries and sip the ice. In the parlor of the house by the Yanming Lake, Yi Hongyu held a wooden comb and combed her hair expressionlessly. Her green Taoist robe was still drying. She was now wearing a very ordinary summer dress of a Tang woman. Her beautiful black hair cascaded over her right shoulder. She looked much more gentle and amiable than before. Ning K looked at her and said, "If you refuse, I can understand." Yi Hongyu stopped combing her hair and looked at him with slight mockery. She said, "I can understand why you want me to refuse. If I enter the second floor of the academy, how can you be proud of yourself?" Ning K said, "Whatever you think." Yi Hongyu said, "To be a student of the headmaster of the academy is the biggest dream of every cultivator. It is the biggest temptation. I am no exception." Ning K felt very regretful and sighed in his heart. Yi Hongyu looked at the wooden comb in her hand quietly and said, "But unfortunately, I can only refuse." Ning K laughed happily and said, "I am also very regretful. Do you know why? Because it is the 250th chapter. I deliberately wrote this chapter as if it was 250. The chapter title is also very silly. I like it very much. The main thing is that I increasingly feel that this world is too noisy and stupid. So I should be more happy in the story. I wish everyone a happy weekend. See you tomorrow." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 446. Ning K smiled very happily. However, Yi Hongyu felt that his smile was disgusting. She asked coldly, "Can you smile any happier?" Ning K said, "If you are willing to watch." Yi Hongyu ignored him and said, "I have said before that it is something to be proud of to be a student of the headmaster of the academy. However, there will be a war between the West Hill Divine Kingdom and the Tang Empire in the next few decades. As a member of the Divine Hall, if I become a student of the headmaster of the academy, what will I do when the war starts?" Ning K did not expect her to give such a reason. He frowned and said, "Long Qing once tried to enter the academy to study. I'm not a good-for-nothing like Long Qing. I know how important I am to the Divine Hall, and I know the role I will play in the war." Yi Hongyu said expressionlessly, "I am also not an idiot like Chin Pippi. I did not even think about the trouble that my actions would bring. I just escaped from the temple and escaped to the back of the mountain of the academy." Ning K said, "Even so, you can just watch." Yi Hongyu said, "I believe in Haotian. My life belongs to Haotian Taoism. How can I watch when the war starts?" Ning K could not get used to hearing the girl talk about war. He thought to himself, "Are you a war maniac?" He could not help but mock. If your life belongs to Haotian Taoism, then why did you run away from the Divine Hall? If someone wanted to kill you, you should have stretched out your neck and let them kill you. Yi Hongyu said, "The Divine Hall does not represent Haotian Taoism. The people in the Divine Hall are not qualified to represent the will of Haotian, at least not all of them. Furthermore, I will return one day, even if I leave." "That is very honest." Ning K nodded. He looked into her eyes and said, "But since you may be the strongest opponent of the Tang Empire in the future, why should I let you stay in Chang'an now?" Yi Hongyu said, "I have also thought of this. So I have decided that if you become my enemy on the battlefield in the future, I will spare your life." Ning K shook his head and said, "It sounds interesting, but after careful study, I find that it's quite unreliable. War is not something you can just think of. The Tang Empire and the West Hill have been at peace for countless years. Even if there may be disputes in the future, it doesn't necessarily have to be a war. Even if there is a war, I don't think it will happen in the decades that we are alive. So in the end, the rewards you give me are all illusory." Yi Hongyu frowned slightly and looked at him as if she was looking at an idiot. She said, "Haven't you noticed the changes in the cultivation world in recent decades?" Ning Ke completely ignored her gaze and answered honestly, "I've only been in the cultivation circle for less than 2 years. How could I care about any changes? If you have read the teachings of the West Hill or some historical classics and have some understanding of the history of the cultivation world, you should know that cultivation is a very difficult thing. In the past 1,000 years, the number of grand cultivators who could enter the knowing destiny state was extremely few." Ning Ke said, "Not many now, but compared to the past, there are a lot more." Yi Hongyu said expressionlessly, "Starting from Mr. Ku of the Academy, the cultivators in the world have continued to climb toward the knowing destiny state and even beyond. Let's not talk about the people of the generation of Divine Lord Lotus. Now, Mr. First, Mr. Second, that guy Chan Pippi, many powerhouses of the West Hill Divine Palace, 7 Leaves, my brother, the 2 temples of the Buddhism sect, and countless temples of Haotian Taoism. There are already many people who have entered the knowing destiny state. Even though my state has been damaged, it is inevitable that I will enter the knowing destiny state." Yi Hongyu said as if she was saying that cabbages should be fried instead of boiled. Ning Ke shook his head. She looked at him and continued, "Even a guy with poor aptitude and slow comprehension like you can still advance so quickly. I think there will be a day when you will also enter the knowing destiny state." "What are you trying to say?" Ning Ke asked confusedly. The overall strength realm of the cultivation world has been constantly improving over the past few decades. Although the experts of the previous generation are still at the top, a new generation of experts has already emerged on the ground like the stars in the sky. Yi Hongyu said, "Everything in the world is fixed. Haotian's fate has already arranged their positions. Why are there so many powerhouses? I can't explain it now. I only know that when the stars are crowded in the starry sky, they will definitely collide and attack each other. With so many powerhouses appearing in the world, there will always be a need for war to wipe out the weaker ones." Ning Ke was silent for a long time after listening to these words. He did not completely accept Yi Hongyu's seemingly calm, but actually fanatical reasoning. But deep in his heart, he vaguely felt that something was indeed going to happen in the cultivation world. Yi Hongyu looked at his eyes quietly and said, "I don't care about the fate of others. But since Hao Ian wants me to be one of the stars, then I must be the brightest one." Ning Ke looked up at her and said seriously, "If there is a day when we really fight, then no matter who wins, let's look at the fallen stars in the sky and reminisce." Yi Hongyu's reason for refusing to enter the academy had left a shadow in Ning Ke's heart. That shadow was not a shadow, but just vaguely pointing to some mountain wonders in front of him. It did not make him feel vigilant or uneasy. Instead, it made him, like Yi Hongyu, have an infinite desire for the unknown future. But he had to hide that shadow deep in his heart because he had more urgent things to deal with now. Today, at the back of the mountain of the academy, eldest brother asked about the new house by Yanming Lake. Ning Ke casually answered, and eldest brother did not continue to ask. The conversation seemed casual, but Ning Ke knew that it was definitely not the case. Although eldest brother did not say anything from the wilderness to Chong, and Ning Ke had begun to confirm that he knew about the story between him and Xiaoho. Even if he did not know about the story from more than a decade ago, he knew about the story in the recent 2 years. Eldest brother knew what he wanted to do. He was even sure that eldest brother had vaguely guessed his intention of buying the house by Yanming Lake. But whether it was eldest brother, second brother, or the teacher, everyone at the back of the mountain of the academy remained silent about his actions. The academy respected the law of the Tang Empire. Eldest brother would not agree with Ning Ke's actions, such as the assassination of Huang Xing and Yu Shuizhu, but there was no evidence to point to him. Ning Ke knew that the decision he made was not in line with the philosophy of the academy. Letting Xiaoho retire was an agreement that eldest brother had reached with him on behalf of the academy. Cutting off all the past, erasing the old stories of the devil's doctrine in West Hill, and letting the world move toward a stable future was the best choice for the Tang Empire. Unfortunately, that would never be Ning Kei's choice. The next morning, Chun Pippi brought Tang Xiaodang to the shore of Yiming Lake. He looked at the two broken gates and scratched his head in confusion. "What's going on?" he asked. The reason why he went to Yiming Lake again was that after thinking hard for a day and a night, he thought he had figured out those things. He could bravely and fearlessly answer Ning Kei's questions in the Lotus Field boat. He was anxious to show his loyalty in front of Ning Kei, so he did not care too much about the damage to the door. Since the door was broken, there was no need to wait for the owner to open the door. Chun Pippi stretched out his fat legs and kicked randomly, making the already broken door even more broken. He kicked out a space that was just big enough for a person to pass through, and then carefully held Tang Xiaodang's hand and walked in. Tang Xiaodang thought to herself that she had cultivated the divine skill of the Enlightenment doctrine. Even if these wooden stubs pierced 8,000 holes in his fat body, they would not leave a trace on her body. There was no need to be so careful. Although she thought so, the little girl had no intention of objecting. She obediently let Chun Pippi hold her hand and walked into the courtyard. The air after the rain was so fresh, and the two black and beautiful long braids kept swaying in the fresh wind. Walking through the corridor, they met Sang Sang. Chun Pippi did not want Tang Xiaodang to hear what he wanted to say to Ning Kei, so he asked Sang Sang to take Tang Xiaodang to the lake to catch frogs. Sang Sang led Tang Xiaodang to the lake bank. Suddenly, she felt as if she had forgotten something. She subconsciously looked back, only to see that Chun Pippi had already entered the main hall. Crossing the threshold, Chun Pippi saw a girl in handmaiden clothes drinking porridge at the table. He asked curiously, "A new maidservant?" Ning Kei looked up at him in shock. Chun Pippi did not wait for him to reply. He sat down at the table, tapped the porcelain bowl on the table, and said to the girl in a cotton shirt beside him, "Give me a bowl of porridge." He looked at Ning Kei and said, "That's what I said. How could you not hire 8 or 10 maidservants for such a big house by the lake?" The girl in handmaiden clothes actually got up to serve Chun Pippi porridge. Ning Kei held the porridge bowl with a very interesting expression on his face. "Sir, your porridge." The girl gently placed the porridge bowl in front of Chun Pippi. Her words were very humble, but her tone was very cold, or rather indifferent. Chun Pippi was slightly startled when he heard the voice. He raised his head to take a look, and he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air when he saw a beautiful and moving face. Holding the porridge bowl, Ning Kei was ready to find a corner to hide. If the two geniuses of Haotian Taoism were to fight in his own house, he would not care about what would become of these expensive furniture if he did not want to die. "Your maidservant is really beautiful," Chun Pippi praised. Then he picked up the porridge bowl and began to eat. He said with a lisp, "How much did you pay for it?" Ning Kei opened his mouth and said bitterly after a while, "I can't afford it." Chun Pippi looked at the maidservant's beauty. The more he looked, the more he liked her. The more he looked, the weirder he felt. He frowned and said, "Why does she look so familiar?" The girl drinking porridge at the table was naturally Yi Hong Yu. However, her green Taoist robe was stained with wind and frost. It was also soaked by the heavy rain and washed by Sang Sang last night. Thus, she was wearing Song Song's handmaiden clothes. Although it was a little small, it made her look even more timid and attractive. Yi Hong Yu looked at Chun Pippi and said calmly, "Sir, you are the one who gave me porridge 10 years ago. How could you forget?" Puff! Chun Pippi spat out all the porridge in his mouth. Even at such a moment, he still forced his fat neck to make sure that the porridge would not spit out on Yi Hong Yu. From this, one could imagine the extent of his instinctive fear of someone. Then he let out a mournful and strange cry, and his whole body flew into the air. He hit the thick and heavy beam, and like a rubber ball, he fell back to the ground. Without the slightest pause, he rushed out of the main hall with a whistling sound. The water and electricity were cut off for a day and a night. All the phones in the house were out of battery. I can't even wash my face or brush my teeth. I can't even flush the toilet. What a miserable world. I thought that there would be electricity, but there was no electricity. I waited until the flowers were broken and the toilet was full. At dawn, I finally plucked up the courage and climbed down the tall building in the dark. The hotel opposite was full, so I went to another hotel and finally found this room. So I updated. I will buy breakfast for my parents and pick up the leader to come to the hotel. Then I will keep an eye on the electricity. I will be very busy and sad, but I will still write. I just don't know how much I can write. Now I realize that as long as there is electricity, other difficulties are nothing. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 447. Although the house by the Yinming Lake had not been completely demolished and rebuilt, many places have been renovated. The main hall, the parlor, and the study were all newly built. The thick beam in the hall had been painted, so there should not be too much dust on it. However, it was raining dust at this time. It was hard to imagine how hard Chinpipi had hit the beam when he jumped into the air like a frightened fat rabbit. The fat figure could not be seen in the spacious main hall, but the wind was still lingering. Ning Kei, who was sitting at the table, held the bowl of porridge and felt the sticky moisture on his face. He wanted to throw the bowl to the ground. After Chinpipi flew out of the main hall, he flapped his sleeves and kept making strange sounds. He was like a fat bird sprinting towards its food. His feet did not touch the ground, and he rushed towards the lake embankment, leaving a trail of dust behind him. If he could calm down at this time, he would find that his cultivation state seemed to have improved under the pressure of fear, and he could fly at an unprecedented speed. Tang Xiaodang and Sang Sang were playing with willow branches by the lake. The two girls were like real children, singing a song, looking childish and cute. Chinpipi flew to Tang Xiaodang and stopped. He grabbed her hand and said, "Let's go." Tang Xiaodang looked at him with her eyes wide open and asked, "Where to?" Chinpipi's answer was unusually concise and powerful. "Back to the academy." "Why?" Tang Xiaodang was even more puzzled. Chinpipi said in a trembling voice, "There's a monster in this house." If she was an ordinary girl who had just fallen in love, she would not think about whether her partner's words were credible or not. Instead, she would instinctively act timid and follow him. But Tang Xiaodang was not an ordinary girl. She had vowed to become the most powerful woman in the world. Instead of being afraid, her eyes suddenly brightened when she heard that there was a monster in the house. She said happily, "If there is a monster, then we should fight it. Why should we run?" Chinpipi looked at Tang Xiaodang's braids swaying in the wind and was extremely distressed. He wanted to run, but he had to stop, because if Tang Xiaodang did not run, how could he run? At this moment, Ning Kei and Yi Hongyu took a shortcut from the side door of the main hall and walked towards the lake. Tang Xiaodang looked at the beautiful girl in the handmaiden uniform beside Ning Kei and was confused. She rubbed her eyes subconsciously and confirmed that it was Yi Hongyu. She could not help but be surprised, and her already bright eyes became even brighter, brighter than the sun in the lake. She slowly clenched her fists. Chinpipi quickly stood in front of her and said, "Calm down, calm down." Ning Kei walked to the front of the two and became angrier when he saw Chinpipi's humble appearance. He said sarcastically, "Calm down. I feel that you, senior martial brother, are the least qualified to say that." Chinpipi had never been willing to suffer losses in front of Ning Kei, let alone in front of Tang Xiaodang. He was even more unwilling to lose face. The man's vanity and pride successfully alleviated some of his fear. He turned around and stared into Ning Kei's eyes, but he refused to look at Yi Hongyu, who was beside him. "How am I not calm?" Ning Kei sighed and said, "It is not that you are not calm. You are afraid. I don't understand what you are afraid of. This is Chong and not West Hill." Chinpipi adjusted his standing posture unnaturally and stared at Ning Quebec. He still refused to look away, as if he was trying to convince himself that Yi Hongyu did not exist beside him. Unfortunately, his slightly trembling voice revealed his true emotions. "Afraid? I'm afraid of what? Who is afraid?" Ning Kei pointed at the millet porridge on his face and body and said angrily, "Look at this. Am I not afraid that you will spit rice? You don't dare to spit it on her face. Are you going to spit it on my face?" Tang Xiaodang then noticed that Ning Kei's face and body were covered with millet porridge. It looked disgusting, but she found it funny when she thought about it. Sang Sang hurried forward and took out a handkerchief from her sleeve to wipe Ninkei's face. Ninkei took the handkerchief and said angrily, "I will do it myself. Don't get this guy's saliva on you." Sang Sang turned to look at Chin Pippi and did not say anything. She just sighed. Chin Pippi was already extremely embarrassed when he saw the porridge that he had spat on Ning Quebec. When he saw Sang Sang sigh, he wanted to jump into the Yinming Lake beside him. Yi Hongyu looked at him and said, "If you jump into the lake, many of the fish in the lake will be crushed by you, and it will be difficult to climb back up after you jump in. It will be even more embarrassing then." Chun Pippi looked at her beautiful face and wanted to cry. He thought that they had not seen each other for so many years. How could she still know what he was thinking? Tang Xiaodang looked at him and asked in confusion, "Are you really going to jump into the lake?" Chin Pippi nodded obediently. Yi Hongyu was a little surprised and said, "You are much more honest than when you were young." Chin Pippi was embarrassed and angry. He gathered his courage and retorted, "When was I not honest when I was young?" Yi Hongyu said calmly, "You peeped at me bathing when you were young." Everyone was silent. The lake was also quiet. The willow branches on the embankment swayed gently in the wind. The wind was not still. Tang Xiaodang looked up at Chin Pippi and asked, "Did I look good?" Chin Pippi nodded honestly and said, "Yes." Tang Xiaodang said, "Is that why you ran away when you saw her?" Chin Pippi nodded again. Tang Xiaodang thought for a while and said, "Then you fell into her trap. I fought with her and know that she is a female gangster. Maybe she deliberately tricked you to look." Chin Pippi was a little confused. He scratched his head as if he had discovered the truth. Yi Hongyu said calmly, "Fatty Chun, do you think so too?" Chun Pippi thought about it seriously for a long time, then shook his head honestly and said, "Although we both know very well that you were indeed thinking of a way to drive me away, peeking at you was indeed my own decision. I didn't think of anything else at the time. I just wanted to humiliate you." Then he hurriedly added, "Because you often humiliated me in the monastery." Tang Xiaodang turned and walked to the other side of the embankment. Chun Pippi was anxious and said, "I was still a child then." She was not old either. Ning Kei's gaze fell on Yi Hongyu's chest. He wondered how big it was a few years ago. Yi Hongyu felt his gaze and was slightly angry. Ning Kei coughed twice and looked at Chun Pippi. He sighed and said, "It turns out that the two of you had such a past. Then I can't help you. Although you were young at that time, such an ugly behavior is really hard to accept." Sang Sang looked up at him and shook her head. She said, "When you were young, you peeped at those sisters bathing. You asked me to keep watch outside the female bathhouse." Ning Kei showed an awkward expression and walked to Chun Pippi's side consciously. "The electricity is on." I went home from the hotel. When the elevator stopped, I climbed up to buy food for my parents. My whole body is sore today. I am really tired. Let me write slowly. Also, today is Monday. Please vote for me. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.